And I know people who have storefronts already who are selling weed like it's legal, because it is.
But they don't have a government.
They don't have a license. There's someone across the street in Trenton from City Hall that has a dispensary. His name's NJ Weedman, and he just does his thing. I've been there and I've bought weed from him, and it was good.
What's cooking, everybody? I am joined in the bunker today by the Jewish Sauce Boss, aka Mr. Will Edelstein. Now, you are probably asking yourself, who is the Jewish Sauce Boss? Well, in addition to that being the nickname of Mr. Edelstein over here, it is also the name of his company, which operates out of Pennsylvania and connects medical marijuana patients with medical marijuana doctors to get their medical marijuana cards and follow all of the legislation correctly, as Pennsylvania does now allow medical marijuana patients to medicate on marijuana. How many times did I just say marijuana? A lot. That was good for keywords. Anyway, I wanted to bring in Will because, number one, Famous Dill from number 56 recommended him, and I heard the name, and I'm like, I gotta talk to that guy. So thank you, Dill. Amazing recommendation. But I wanted to bring in Will because he is an expert, not just on the cannabis industry, but on marijuana itself, on the plant, on the use cases, on the history, on the legislation, on everything. And he is an advocate for its legalization, which I agree with, but it also gave me the opportunity to play as much devil's advocate as possible. And so what I tried to do is, even though I agree with Will's positions and how he articulated his answers today, I agree with them even more in many cases. I tried to poke holes in the argument where I could, as if I were somebody who is against legalization. So I hope I did a good enough job, but I thought Will was awesome, minus like a couple rabbit holes I might have sent him down. Like, I think he had a chance to directly answer pretty much everything. So I will leave it to you guys to draw your own conclusions. As I've often said before, and I will say throughout the future, I don't want you to just automatically agree with things in here if you enjoy the show. I love that you enjoy the show, but I encourage you guys to think about complicated topics like this for yourself. Listen to the arguments presented, listen to what's good, what's bad, and then make your own conclusion on it. And so we'll talk about this more down the line with other guests. It's a very, very important topic in my opinion, and it's a complicated one, and it has a lot of consequences in a good and bad way, no matter what, where this direction goes with it. So I thought this was a great one to start with, and I hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you to Will for coming in, aka the Jewish Sauce Boss. I love that name. Now, if you have not used the link in my description along with the code TRENDIFIER at checkout to get $100 off either your 8 Sleep Pod Pro mattress or 8 Sleep Pod Pro cover, check it out. Because 8 Sleep is the first legitimate tech company to do mattresses. They're not some mattress company that threw a little bit of electricity in a mattress and said, boom, we got innovation. Instead, 8 Sleep is a Miami. It's now a Miami company that has come in and built a proprietary app that plugs right into their mattress or their mattress cover, which, again, the only difference, as I say every week, is that the cover is half the price. It is queen or king size and goes on top of your current mattress. The mattress is a full-blown mattress. So I use the cover. I encourage the cover because you don't have to change your mattress and you get all the same things. But 8 Sleep's proprietary app plugs into that cover or that mattress and optimizes your sleep stages around you throughout the night, utilizing things like your body temperature and how it'll change the temperature accordingly throughout the night, along with your REM and other things, so that when you wake up in the morning, you may have slept 6 hours, but it will feel like you slept 8. So use that link in my description along with the code TRENDIFIER, that's TRENDIFIER, at checkout, and you will get $100 off either the 8 Sleep Pod Pro mattress or 8 Sleep Pod Pro cover, and I don't think you'll regret it. Anyway, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. We are on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you're on YouTube right now, hit that subscribe button, hit that bell button, and leave a like and comment on the video if you would, please. To everyone who has been sharing their favorite episode or the most recent episode with a friend each week, I said it last week, it's been a huge help. It's incredible. So thank you. I see it in my DMs from people who have found the show that way, so I want to keep encouraging that. As I've always said, word of mouth is the best thing we can do, and you guys have been awesome so far. So if you've done it already and you have other friends who listen to podcasts and you can continue to do that, that would be amazing. And to all of you who have not shared the show with a friend who listens to podcasts who you think would like this one, if you could take the time to do that, just pick out your favorite episode. The latest one might be this one. Send it to them. You know, let's see if we can add them to the community here. So thank you to everyone once again who's done that. It's amazing. Let's keep it rolling. That said, you know what it is. I'm Julian Dorey, and this is TRENDIFIER. Let's go! This is one of the great questions in our culture. Where is the nuance? You're giving opinions and calling them facts. You feel me? Everyone understands this, but few seem to do it. If you don't like the status quo, start asking questions.
I love the most, which is cannabis. You know, I wanted to help people and solve problems, so I've been able to do it through this vehicle that I've, you know, called Jewish Sauce Boss.
Yeah, and I want to get to that today, but I want to lay a lot of groundwork with this because you're an industry expert. You know, you know your shit about what's going on, and I think at this point, if you haven't seen what's happening here with things loosening up across states and stuff like that, and the fact that it's become much more mainstream and a lot of the myths around marijuana are starting to get dispelled across even like older generations, you know, it's still like a wild, wild west. And a lot of people are like, well, what's going on? What's the difference between medical and like, what are these companies in Canada growing stuff? So I want to like touch on all that today. But to start, when did you get into it? And like, I hear you talk in the original answer you were given right there about your name, you know, you're connecting a lot of things to like your spirituality and some meta stuff that clearly like cannabis has had that effect on you. So I'm just curious like what the story is for you.
So for me, my relationship with cannabis, you know, really, I would say went up a notch when I was around 18, 19, you know, I was at school and started to feel that pressure of life and, you know, what the hell are you going to do with your life? What am I doing here in college? What am I going to do? Like, I don't know, like all this crazy shit. So cannabis for me became this tool, this mechanism to have a sense of, you know, calm within myself. And then I really started to try to understand why this was helping me, even at a young age. So I would say I got so interested in it. I gave a speech in college on the decriminalization of cannabis in 2010 or 2011.
Wow.
Right in that area. And even my teacher at the time, she was intrigued by the topic, but she had some trepidation about the topic as well because, you know, not many people were talking about it. It's very misunderstood. It's not something that was a social norm by any means at that point. You know, no one talked about cannabis, no one talked about marijuana, no one talked about weed in the way that I was looking to do it. So at the end of the day, her one caveat with that topic was to make sure that I took it very seriously and that it wasn't to make people laugh and all of these things. And the one thing I said to her, I remember saying to her, was I'm not responsible for the level of maturity of the audience that I'm going to deliver my speech to because they're not in the same mindset as me of what this plant can actually do.
Wow.
And I remember there was one slide in the presentation that it just came up and the whole class just broke up laughing. And it was, what are names of weed? Like, you know, what are all the names of marijuana? And, you know, like it was a valid point. It's funny. Any good speech, there's an essence of something to break it down and make it a little funny. So when you can get through calling it weed and the devil's lettuce and all this bullshit that's been, I don't know if I can curse on here. But
no, you can say whatever the fuck you want.
All right, cool. All the stuff that it's been called, it was like no one in the class was ever ready for that. So they just laughed. And, you know, laughing is usually a result of just, you know, not knowing what to do. And, if, you know, they just, you know, laughed. And then after the speech was over, after the class left, she was like, you know, she's talking to me and she's like, it was good, but I told you not to make the blah, blah, blah laugh. And then I said to her again, I was like, it's not my fault that they're not mature enough to see a slide with weed and cannabis and all this stuff on there and different names and picture of the plant and all, it's not my fault they're not mature enough for that information. And sometimes I still feel that today in this exact moment, right? Because, a lot of times you start talking about cannabis, you start talking about marijuana, you start talking about medical marijuana, and people just are like, they want to be cool, and then they'll say something that they don't know what to do. They don't know they don't have the information. They don't have the knowledge. They don't have the experience. They don't have the relationship with the plant. So for me, I've been interested in this for forever, since I really got into understanding how it was improving the quality of my life and became a part of my life. And I wanted to share that information even at that point.
I think people jump to the same conclusions that your teacher was a decade ago. And it's like, you look at alcohol, which is a natural foil for weed. That's been a part of history everywhere, right? Like, it's besides 11 years where we were dumb for 5 minutes and outlawed it, which was, the crime that arose from that, neither here nor there. But that was very stupid. But other than that, that's always been like a thing. Like, people go out and get drunk. And technically, alcohol is a poison. Mm-hmm. You can drink enough to die. Mm-hmm. And at some point here, 1937 and 1970, moreover, like what happened in the Supreme Courts and stuff, we built in and ingrained in society that weed is drug, it's bad, and it's different than alcohol, which got built into me as well for a long time. And then I still wanted,
Me too.
Right. So I still wanted to do it, but I was like, all right, well, this is a drug. And what we've started to see now is that the benefits that can come from it are so strong, and you see little old ladies using CBD oil and stuff, which isn't weed, but you know what I mean? Like, same idea. And so even though we've gotten a lot of that, people still put that whole image on it that, like, oh yeah, that's a taboo type thing to be in. And they start to label you like, oh, that's someone who is just trying to justify their own use of the substance. And I think what's really a shame is that guys like you who have to go do this stuff, you have to spread the word, you have to put the knowledge out. You're doing it for something that is on the same playing field as alcohol to me, as far as like if you're going to use it as a pure vice. I'm not talking about the benefits. I'm talking just a pure vice. But yet you don't see people out there having a hock for alcohol. You don't see like Amstel Light executives going around saying, here's why you need alcohol in your life. It's just accepted. So it's like you're constantly playing from behind in something that you never should have been behind in.
Exactly. Well, you touched on a couple of points, right? So the prohibition is unique in the sense that, cannabis was part of people's medicine cabinets up until that time frame you spoke of, like the early 1920s, 1930s, when they started to really demonize cannabis users and consumers. And the reason that this all took place was purely because of racism. And so to, teach on something right now, if some of the listeners don't know this history, there was someone named Harry Anslinger. You can even, look this up if you wanted to. Harry Anslinger was the head of, I believe, like the first narcotics unit, like
it was like the drug enforcement agency, but it's called something different back then.
Yeah, it's escaped me. But the man's name was Harry Anslinger. It was in the 1930s, and he found a way to ruin people's lives, lock them up, put them in jail. And if you can't do that purely because of someone's skin color or purely because you don't like what someone does or looks like, you start to think about, how do I keep these people locked up? How do I ruin these people's lives? So you criminalize their habits and behaviors. So they realized that a lot of people, such as musicians, Mexicans, African Americans, a lot of people in those cultures consumed cannabis. And there is crazy shit that this man said, along with a lot of other leaders in various agencies and regulatory bodies and senators and all that stuff, that set the tone for the racist laws that were put in place. Because still right now, a black person or a brown person or someone who's low income is 4 to 5 times more likely to get locked up for cannabis than a white guy. And it's just sad. It's just so stupid. You know, we have all these people rotting away in jail, 40,000 plus nonviolent cannabis offenders in jail.
That's crazy, man.
It makes me sad and sick inside. And you can't do anything, right? There's nothing anyone can do until more people begin to understand that criminalizing, demonizing, stigmatizing, prohibiting a plant does nothing but hurt the communities that you're doing this to.
Yes.
When you allow for cannabis to be legalized and for people to be educated and for people to be open and inviting and showing them and doing all of these things, can really change the game. Because a lot of people, as you see right now, where we're at in life and this moment in history, I mean, mental health is at a all-time breaking point for many people. And if you go to a doctor and your doctor, which, by the way, is not required in medical school to learn about what is called the endocannabinoid system, which is within everyone's body, just like we have a respiratory system, an immune system. There's a system within our body called the endocannabinoid system.
I don't know anything about this, actually.
Well, I'm excited that it's been brought up.
Fill me in.
So the endocannabinoid system is here to regulate the body back to a balanced point. So we have within our body, across our entire body, receptors to receive cannabis, which is why there's all these different consumption methods that you see now, whether it's a cream, a vape pen, smoking it, dabbing it. There's patches, there's mints, there's edibles, there's tinctures, there's probably a new consumption method being created right now by some smart human being. So the endocannabinoid system is usually deficient in most people, where they don't receive cannabinoids or they're just sick. They don't understand this system. They've never been taught about it. They've never been educated about it. And that's where a lot of people are getting benefit from a CBD product who've never used cannabis, never smoked weed, never been into that type of a lifestyle. It's because they've never been able to use a product that is cannabis. Whatever you want to say, hemp, cannabis, the plant is the same. It's a cannabis plant.
Yeah.
It's just the amount of certain cannabinoids within the plant that has been made legal or illegal in the eyes of the federal government.
Okay. I want to make sure we understand this, because there's details to this.
There's a lot here.
Yeah. I want to unpack this as we're going along. So 2 questions to start. Number 1, did they come up with the name, and I have it behind us, the endocannabinoid system, based on the existence of cannabis already, and they named it because it has receptors that interact with that plant? Number 1. And number 2, you know, we throw around the terms all the time. I do too, and half the time I got to check myself on whether I know what I'm talking about, but we say cannabis, we say THC, we say, you talked about with CBD and how much and what then gets you a high or what doesn't. So when you're talking about what you just mentioned with how much is in there and how they regulate it, can you just touch on the high end of that and what the current setup is maybe at the federal level?
Yeah, so the endocannabinoid system, the nomenclature and who created that name, I don't know exactly, but I will say there is a scientist named Raphael Mechoulam who is from Israel, and he is the scientist that discovered THC within the cannabis plant and recognized that THC was the cannabinoid that was generating all of the effects that people were deriving value from. So that was, I believe, in the 60s, maybe 1964. And that is another huge reason, the tie-in back to the name, right? Israel's been a huge leader of research for cannabis. That scientist has done an amazing job explaining that plant, talking about that plant, and showing the world its benefits. But the endocannabinoid system, the naming of it, I'm not sure. But there's systems in our bodies. It's evolution. It's just like every other system that's evolved through time. And we have in our brain 2 receptors, a CB1 and a CB2 receptor. These receptors require cannabinoids to help them regulate the body. And, you can look these up and study this stuff because it's really scientific. It's really direct. The endocannabinoid system is a vast system that runs through the body. The CB1 receptor, the CB2 receptor, the cannabinoids bind to these receptors. And, if you're feeling pain and you use a product with THC, the THC is going to really help with that pain. And it's going to help hit that pain quickly and mitigate the pain, which is why people go to sometimes a higher THC product who have chronic pain.
Doesn't CBD, and maybe I'm jumping around a little bit, so apologies if I am, but doesn't CBD like counteract THC as well? Mm-hmm. But it comes from the same thing.
Mm-hmm. So for example, like if you got too high or you too medicated, a good way to help counterbalance that, if you want to try to come down, would be a high dose of CBD, and a good way for that would be a tincture under the tongue, because it's a pretty quick absorption method.
A tincture?
Tincture, yeah. It's like a little vial. You twist off the top, pinch the top, pulls the liquid up, and you drop it under your tongue. It's a great method. Works for a lot of people who don't like to smoke, who want to be discreet, and it has usually like a quick onset and a decent lasting effect. And there's products at dispensaries that you can get to tincture, whatever it is, right? But I guess to touch on the main question is like the federal prohibition of cannabis is really unique because we had a farm bill get passed in 2018 for hemp, and that's allowing a threshold of 0.3% THC or less.
How do you control that?
Testing, lab testing.
So the farmers have to have labs and test.
The farmers are required. Anyone who's producing or manufacturing a product that has a hemp derivative, whether and that's what I mean. This goes deep. So when you have CBD, right, you have a full spectrum product, which would have that small threshold of THC. You have a broad spectrum, which has cannabinoids and usually does not have any THC. You have isolated products where they only have CBD, no other cannabinoids. So for me, it's like, it's a lot of, you got to look, you got to test, you got to say, is what I'm doing right now working for me if I'm not feeling well? What's bothering you? What's going on with you? What are you experiencing? What are you trying to change? Because this plant affects everyone differently, right? You and I could use the same product, go to a dispensary, and they say it's a sativa, and it's supposed to make you euphoric and uplifting and energetic and all of these things. But then if you want to go further and understand that the effects have a lot to do with what are called terpenes, and terpenes are the flavor and aroma of the plant. There's terpenes and cannabinoids. The combination of those two things are really what give you your effects. So if you want to buy something purely based off THC percentage, you might be misguided, because that sativa, that's a high THC percentage, might have some terpenes in there that would make you a little tired, a little sedated, might make you, fall asleep. And that other product, if someone else uses it, could have the exact opposite effect, which is why we need the research, which is why we need the federal government to take cannabis out of its Schedule 1 status. That's the number one problem with cannabis, is that it's a Schedule 1 drug.
And for people, we say that, what does that mean?
Schedule 1,
yep.
It means that a product has no medicinal value and a high potential for abuse.
Correct.
The the drugs in that classification are cannabis, marijuana, magic mushrooms, LSD, and heroin. Okay. We're seeing right now that's not true. That's not true. So if the federal government's telling us that, and then that's what a Schedule 1 drug means, why is there...
They don't have cocaine in there?
Cocaine's a Schedule 2.
Come on.
Yeah. So
I didn't even know that.
You want to know what else is Schedule 2? Fentanyl.
Come on.
Yeah. Because fentanyl and cocaine are used in certain areas of medicine.
Well, I guess that is technically right, but they are... So, all right. Yeah, I had that.
It hurts your head when you start to think.
Yeah, I had that completely wrong. I thought they were all Schedule 1 because we've seen, and we'll get to, there's so many things to unpack here, dude. Holy shit.
Yeah.
But like,
a lot.
We're seeing a big movement with psilocybin mushrooms. We're seeing it with MDMA as a form of therapy for people with PTSD, among other things. And, you know, whenever I'm looking at this stuff, like I look at that a little differently than marijuana because there's more aspects to it. Whereas to me, marijuana is pretty straightforward. It is a plant that was put here for us, evolution, whatever. And like, it makes sense. The other things we have to look at, well, how much abuse can happen. And there's also a lot of misinformation around that. You know, we talk about addictiveness to things. There are some people who get that no matter what. You can get that with anything.
100%.
You know? So looking at like Schedule 1, because we throw around these terms, and obviously like I'm throwing it around. I didn't even know that some of these aren't on there. I guess that makes sense in the sense that people, I know fentanyl in small doses is used in hospitals along with like, I don't think they use pure cocaine, but they use like...
Cocaine's usually a numbing agent in dentistry.
Yeah.
Or like not cocaine, but like some form of that. There's something there that...
A derivative of it.
That allows it to be in Schedule 2 because there's, I guess, some, in their perspective, medical value.
But this is interesting because the Schedule 1 thing, as you said, is at the federal level. Mm-hmm. And so...
and I'll say it again. The fact that cannabis is a Schedule 1 drug is the number one reason why there's a shitload of problems in the legal industry,
yes,
in the traditional market, which some people call the black market, legacy market, whatever people want to call it.
I like legacy market.
Legacy's
That's
cool.
good.
And, if we're able to remove the schedule of cannabis and more so deschedule the drug, removing it from a schedule of a drug, by all means, like alcohol and tobacco are not a scheduled drug. But those are two vices that kill a lot of people every year. And there's no medical value for tobacco as far as I'm concerned. No. I don't think there's any medical value for alcohol unless you're going to rub some alcohol on a cut. I don't know. Maybe that better be some Everclear. But
well, it's a different use case too.
But ultimately, at the end of the day, we just have to smarten up. We all have to smarten up when it comes to a lot of the things we're discussing. We're talking about a plant. And if you were to take every senator and every politician and have an intimate conversation like we're having without the cameras on and the microphones and the lights, they would all say, yeah, I would legalize cannabis tomorrow. But the fact is, cannabis isn't represented in society well enough to serve the politicians that make decisions for the industries that are thriving, that are stifling cannabis legalization, such as some of the alcohol industry, such as some of the private prison industry, such as some of the pharmaceutical industry, and the list goes on and on and on.
I'm glad you clarified that because my question was going to be, it's not so much it doesn't have representation, it's the existing legacy systems that have banded together more representation and more moolah.
So basically it really is the political arm to where cannabis doesn't have the respect when you're sitting at the table discussing issues. No one is caring about cannabis, and that's where we'll hopefully see some change. There's groups coming together. There's a group I'm a part of called the Cannabis Action Project, which has a lot of smart people coming together that are looking to discuss and change and advocate and fight for these issues that are really plaguing the cannabis industry as a whole, because we can all agree that changing the scheduling of cannabis is beneficial to everyone. It's beneficial to everyone that is involved, except for the people that benefit from it not changing.
It also doesn't, like, the literal if we're going to go off that, the literal definition, as you put it, which is a drug that has no medical benefit. That defines it as Schedule 1.
A high potential for abuse.
If you're going to argue that, I'll even agree with you that you could make like a cocaine and fentanyl Schedule 2, because technically, as much of a slippery slope, especially with fentanyl that is, technically that's true. But then, I mean, it's like, that's embarrassing that you have weed as a Schedule 1 when it's literally always been used for medicinal purposes throughout human history, let alone like the last 10 years.
Yeah, if you go to, like, I think it's called, like, it's the Pharmacopoeia book of like the early 1900s, maybe the late 1800s, you'll see cannabis being talked in there as medicine, along with, there was cocaine extra. There was a lot of weird things that, well, maybe not weird, maybe things that we would look at as weird now, and they were looking at as ways to help people and try and make them well and heal them and find ways that weren't available yet. But ultimately, we've just demonized a plant that needs to be set free. You know, without full freedom of this plant, without being able to grow it at your house, without being able to smoke it in your backyard and not care and not worry about anything and not think that the FBI is going to come banging on your door. Like, half the time people use cannabis and have a negative experience because they've been programmed their entire life to be fearful of this plant. And when they finally take that step, you know, maybe live life on the edge and take a hit, they actually experience what cannabis does, which is take a deep dive into yourself. And if you don't fucking like yourself, you might have a panic attack. You might have an anxiety attack. You might not like what you discover about yourself, because that sometimes is some scary shit. And the fact that cannabis is considered by the federal government that tells you to do a lot of things, but when I'm trying to fight for a plant and tell people to use cannabis and put cannabis in your body, and it's like, I don't know. It's very hard. It's really a hard position to be in, because
you have to advocate.
It's nonstop. That's why, like, I talk about working out. That's why I talk about being active. That's why I show myself smoking weed and going to the gym. That's why I just put out the content that I do, which hopefully sparks change or sparks a conversation or makes someone question something or think about something differently. And that's all I really want, you know, at the end of the day, is because I know cannabis benefits my life. I've been able to help thousands of people enhance their life through this plant, through the platform and the brand that I've created. And there's no one who can tell me otherwise. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I've watched it happen. I've had the feedback from people. But until it changes in the eyes of the federal government, until we remove it from a Schedule 1, until cannabis companies can bank their money, until cannabis companies can accept credit cards and debit cards just like any other business, we're a long ways away from any sort of normalization for this plant. We're very, very far from it. We're so far from it. We're in New Jersey. It's illegal here. Yeah. But you can't grow your own weed at home. That's not legal.
Follow the money, man.
It's crazy.
Like you said,
yeah.
It all comes back to that.
And that's why I'm hoping to stay here in this role and focus it in the vehicle that I've built for Jewish Sauce Boss to do the things I want to do, to let people know that you don't need to smoke weed every day, but you can utilize cannabis into your life to improve the quality of it through many use cases.
This goes back to one of the first things I posed to you at the very beginning, where I was talking about how guys like you are in the unfortunate position of having to advocate for something which is not a level playing field with existing accepted vices like alcohol and things like that. And one of the precarious positions it puts you in is not just the whole idea like, oh, well, he's a stoner, you know, of course he wants to do it. It's like, and I'm talking about like people who just immediately put up a wall, like with an attitude like that. It's also, you're trying to encourage it, which I think also the use cases are great. I think it's been scientifically demonstrated for that. But with anything, I don't care what it is, as long as it is not like food that you have to eat to survive. People decide what to put in their own body, right? And they want, like, the ideal that all of us would dream of if we knew anything the day we were born is that we never have to put a single thing inside of us, which is not possible. Like, that's not realistic.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's a lot of people who would push back, like maybe from the older school generations, and say, well, why do you have to get everyone to do it? You know, why are you trying to encourage everyone to do it? If they don't want to do it, don't let them do it. I think that if you can balance the line of, hey, here's all the benefits. I do it. I'm cool, whatever you do. Just don't judge the people doing it. A lot of us do, and it's helpful, and here's why. That's the message that, to me, when I've seen older people get sold on it, that's how they're getting sold. When people aren't so much like in their face about it, like, you gotta do it, you gotta do it. They're more just like, hey, it helps. Yeah, I think that's normal. It is. It's kind of medically proven. If I'll direct you to where, you know, you can see what the benefits are. And then over time, people make a decision for themselves. And I think, like, if we do more of that, then we'll get there faster. The whole money and government situation aside, which is, I want to get to more of that, but that's a very real thing.
I mean, the cannabis plant, the cannabis industry, the entire thing is just, you need to educate people. You need to educate on everything. You need to educate people. I mean, I was just talking to someone about this. I host events every Wednesday in Philadelphia, in Center City, on a roof deck. It's an amazing experience. We've been doing it every week for almost 5 weeks. And it's the only venue in Philadelphia that I'm aware of that's friendly to the medical marijuana patient. And what we do is we invite anyone and everyone from the community to come out. We're not charging you to come in. We're encouraging you to, buy a drink from the bar and, buy some food and, bring your own medicine, and you can medicate on the deck.
BYOW, baby.
Exactly. And, something we're realizing is the world just doesn't know, like they're like, what? People are like, what is it? What can I can medicate there? Yeah. I can bring my medicine there. There'll be other patients there doing this. Yes, and yes again.
How many people have you gotten into these things?
I mean, we've been, I'd say 20 to 40,
good.
Coming out since the 3rd week of July. So I'd say we're on like our 4th or 5th event, given the times of, that we're in and everyone's level of comfort participating in events. We're having a good turnout. And what we're looking to do is, like you said, right? Bring the community together. If you are someone who doesn't use cannabis, but you like to enjoy a good atmosphere, and maybe your friend does, or your girlfriend does, or whatever it might be, we want someone who can drink a beer and stand next to someone who doesn't drink a beer and prefers to smoke a joint, and have a conversation with that person. And for them to understand that they're both looking to adjust their vibration and their frequency by consuming something. That's what we all do when we go to a wedding or go to an event. Most people run to a bar, grab their drink so they can loosen up and change the vibration within them to get on the dance floor, to have fun, to get the jitters out, to do whatever. We're doing the same thing at our events. We're not like demonizing it. We're not doing this. We're not saying, oh, you don't smoke, you can't come, or you're not a patient, you can't come. No, we're building a community, and the cannabis consumer should be able to hang out with the person who likes to drink weed, or excuse me.
Well, someday.
You know where my head's at. Like, speaking of, you can drink weed, and that's actually like a really cool thing, because there's a ton of that's one of the consumption methods I might have not have mentioned earlier.
Does any of it taste good yet, though?
Drinks. Yes.
Does any of it taste good?
Yes.
Because there was one that a friend of mine had. I think I took a sip of it, and I don't think it was like a pure. I may be remembering wrong, but it was pretty garbage.
Were you in New Jersey or where were you?
I think I was in Jersey. It was a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it probably wasn't that good a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's brands that make really good cannabis beverages, and cannabis beverages will be a huge, huge market. It's already a huge market. There's a couple brands that are standing out right now. One I could think of is Can, CAAN. You can check those guys out. There's some legal markets. And really what that is, right? It's a low dose of THC in a drink form, because a lot of people like to, like we just kind of referred to, get into the moment or experience by having a drink. And the intersection of health and wellness, as we've talked about, alcohol is a depressant, doesn't really have too much benefit for you. People might want to start opting for a different drink of choice that can make them feel a certain way or a desired effect without the effects of alcohol that a lot of people don't like or are growing old of, or they're kind of changing their habits and behaviors. And that's where you're going to see businesses and entrepreneurs and the like start to cater to the markets that are going to come to the surface. But a friend of mine has a great drink company. It's called Juice Joint, and he does all kinds of juices and does CBD, Delta 8. He'll do THC if he's in that market. And he's told me, he's like, the drink market's it's massive. A lot of people want to grow the best weed or smoke weed or do this or that, but it just depends on like what you're looking for right within this plant. So whether I can talk on it from a medicinal point of view, from a lifestyle point of view, from putting people together and educating them on how to consume, why to consume, how to get your medical marijuana certification. I mean, we do a lot. And sometimes there's so much to do in this space. As someone like me who's a business person, who's building a brand, who's focused on this thing that they've created, you can get so diluted with what's happening in the industry and want to try to do it all. And like I'm a victim of that all the time. Like I feel like I can do everything. I can't. I totally can't. But I want to do everything within my ability to create the changes I want to see. But like I said, there's so much to learn. So that's why it's like, if you're interested in this topic and you're like a college kid and you're in college, you're rolling a blunt right now, and you're like, wait a second, I could like be in this industry? Hell yeah, you could be in this industry. Yes. It's one of the fastest growing industries in the world. It's employing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. They're projecting this industry to be $30 billion
Where's it at
by
right
2030. Now? I don't know, a few billion?
Yeah,
a handful of billions?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you're seeing $1 billion acquisitions and companies buying each other up, and it's absolutely a wild place to be. And I just feel incredibly grateful to be in this moment, to be 4 years into my journey with this brand, and to do what we do every day. We put out content and information every day. One of our main platforms is Instagram, so follow us at Jewish Sauce Boss. And we talk about a lot of different shit. Like I have a mantra I say every morning, and I say it to the world. I say it to the people who want to check out the shit I put out to the world. And it's to remind me of like the simple things. And it's just like all the stuff I want to do every day and remind myself and do it. And it's like, and the biggest thing people have resonated with is one thing I say is don't be a fucking asshole. Like every day, don't be a fucking asshole. It's such an easy thing to say, but it's such a hard thing to do. Like even I catch myself, I'm like, oh, in my head, I'm like, don't be a fucking asshole. I'm like, don't do it. Like
it's like weaving in multiple things to it. Like, you're not just out here promoting cannabis because it's got the medical benefits and all that. It's like, well, you put a personality behind it too. You put a belief system behind it too, and it all happens to blend together because it's a part of your business, and your business, a big part of it involves spreading correct information and educating people.
Exactly. And, you know, Jewish Sauce Boss is our brand. We have two websites, jewishsauceboss.com, and then we have a hyper-focused platform to get you your medical marijuana card in Pennsylvania for now. And we have every resource available. So anyone in Pennsylvania can go to our website, have a seamless experience. Everything's online. Everything's telemedicine. You apply, you schedule, you book your appointment. We even have a pre-qualification tab to make sure you have all the information you need before going through the process.
Do you hook people up with doctors?
Yes. So we're an intuitive, convenient service that bridges the connection between physician and our clients who become a medical marijuana patient.
So you have, like, I want to say this right and not say it wrong. You have physicians that you're specifically partnered with.
Yes.
Who are firm believers. And okay.
So in Pennsylvania, to be a doctor, that it's a recommendation. It's not a prescription. That's a very important distinction here.
What does that mean?
The doctor. So we'll take it back a step. So our platform, we're the company that will help you get certified if you're not able to locate a medical marijuana doctor within your own network, or if your primary care physician is not certified. So doctors need to go through a 4-hour training course through the state of Pennsylvania to become certified to issue and recommend medical marijuana to patients.
Is that different state to state, I assume?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really can only speak confidently on Pennsylvania with that for now. But I'm sure there's a similar process state to state. It might, but how difficult or easy it is, I'm not sure. But in Pennsylvania, almost any doctor who has a active license can take this course and join the registry of a medical marijuana doctor in Pennsylvania. There's interesting language in the medical marijuana bill in Pennsylvania that explicitly says doctors are not allowed to market or promote themselves as a marijuana physician, which is interesting, a little weird, but interesting. And so, doctors do it anyway. There's doctors out here that are, I'm the weed doctor.
How do they get around that?
Well, they're short-term thinking because they're not going to get around it for long. I've already seen it come and go for a lot of people. So the reason doctors like working with us is because the only way you can, find a doctor is usually by working with a platform like mine. There's other platforms out there that provide services like this, but our platform does it in a really unique way, which is, kind of everything we're outlining here as a lifestyle brand that complements everything we believe in. And we have this hyper-focused platform to get you your med card. And then to become a medical marijuana patient and to be within our community, then you can come to our events.
Right.
And then you build your relationships. It's a good flow. And other things we're looking to do soon is educate our clients who become patients on a lot of the things that they have no knowledge of or information of. Like, they don't know what it's like to go to a dispensary the first time. They don't know what products are there that are good, that they should try or shouldn't try or shouldn't spend their money on or should spend their money on.
Yeah.
So really the evolution of Jewish Sauce Boss was just figuring out how to service the market that I'm a part of.
Well, you're also looking at it from the state level in PA, which is an important distinction because it's very weird to me how the legal process of weed goes down in this country. And we already touched on, like, the ridiculousness of the schedules of drugs and everything. But I think there was like a Supreme Court ruling, I want to say in like the early 2000s. I think there were a couple like throughout the 2000s that affirmed essentially that the federal government has the complete power and autonomy to regulate marijuana, meaning they can say ban it. But what we've seen is that even though they've done that through certain acts and things over the years, states have openly, over the past, you could say 25 years, but specifically over the last 10, big time, you've seen a lot of states put in their own legislation and now say you're allowed to do this, you're allowed to do that, we'll decriminalize this, we'll allow medical marijuana here, whatever, and set it all up. And essentially, the federal government hasn't necessarily fought back on that, which they technically, whether we agree with it or not, have a legal precedent to do it. So I do see some good trends there. What I don't like about it is that it makes it for something that people in all 50 states do at a very high volume as far as like the number of people who are exposed to marijuana and use it regularly. We don't have any uniformity. We have some states that still totally ban it. You know, we have criminalization here, not criminalization there. And it creates a lot of traps for people because people are moving around all the time and doing things. And so, you know, right now we need guys like you who are an expert on a state specifically, especially like things like that. But eventually, you know, I think it's a 0 to 100 problem. But the ideal situation for me would be that at least from a non-criminal level, from a schedule level, which is a separate argument that should be common sense, and then from a like usage level, the federal government should just say like, yo, it goes, right? And then if states still want to be old school about something and not get with the times on certain things, like where you possess it or where you do it or how you do it, okay, then they'll have to get with it eventually, but they can do that. You know, I don't know what your opinion is there, but it's just interesting to me because it seems to be there's like a total workaround in weed when it comes to the state's relationship with the federal government, and I've never seen anything else like that.
So there's an act, I believe it's called the MORE Act, and that you can double check this, but the MORE Act, I believe, basically told the federal government to not use any resources to enforce any laws that would impede with legal medical marijuana operations or adult use, which is sometimes referred to a rec market, or their operations.
Oh, this is the thing that just got passed in December.
Is that the MORE Act?
Yeah.
Yeah, I believe that's...
this is very recent. I remember that.
Yeah, so there's been some provisions to protect the cannabis industry. But like you're saying, they're not changes in law. They're a act that people agree to for now. It's not a law.
Well, that's its own law, but you're saying it doesn't make previous laws irrelevant.
It doesn't change anything. It just it's an act that says we're going to agree to not do this. But that could change any moment for whatever reason. That's why it's really bullshit and annoying and totally a mind fuck half the time with everything and anything when it comes to cannabis, because state laws are different than federal laws. Federal laws supersede state laws. While we're in a state that has a legal market, there's still no dispensaries open. It's been a while now. They're still figuring it out. There's no way to get lab tested cannabis or lab tested products from a legitimate retailer in New Jersey outside of the ones who are just doing it. And I know people who have storefronts already who are selling weed like it's legal, because it is. But
they don't have a government.
They don't have a license. There's someone across the street in Trenton from City Hall that has a dispensary. His name's NJ Weedman, and he just does his thing. I've been there and I've bought weed from him, and it was good.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So he's right across.
He's across. You could look him up right now. You could look up his shit. It's called NJ Weedman's Joint.
you understand why that doesn't make sense to me. Like that, it's not.
That's why for me, sometimes questions I get, I just have to tell people my reality and my experience, because like,
even the mayor, I'm just pulling up on you. Even the mayor's a fan.
Dude,
We're behind a paywall here, but the headline was that he opens up across City Hall, and even the mayor of Trenton's a fan.
Yeah, he's been arrested for weed so many times, and he gets out of it because he understands the game. He understands what's going on, and he's openly selling cannabis. Probably right, not him, but his team and whatever. And I'm saying this because I champion it. I think it's cool. Like, I got to speak on stage with that man once, and it was mad cool. He's an OG in the game. So yeah, I've been to his dispensary in Trenton, New Jersey, where you walk in and buy weed, and it's chill, and it's like not weird, and it's not uncomfortable, and it's not like armed security guards like staring you in the face when you walk through the door, even though I'm sure there's people there who are providing security.
Yeah.
But so this is what I mean, right? Like, it's all bullshit right now. Like, it's crazy. Like, I get to see it from this level with a gentleman like NJ Weedman. His name's Ed Forshane. He is a cool dude in my book. I've never done much with him besides speak on stage and bullshit with him and see him from afar, but I respect what he's doing. I can't speak on any other practices. But at the end of the day, I have no clue what is going to happen next. It's such a volatile industry. Like, tomorrow they could legalize weed. Like, if they wanted to, like, senators and legislators could do this tomorrow. They could literally do it tomorrow. But
half of them smoke too.
They all smoke weed. Yeah.
And if they're a lawyer, most lawyers totally do, or at least did throughout law school. It's like a known thing.
Lawyers love drugs. That's all I know.
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that.
That's I said it. But yes, I've smoked weed with lawyers, doctors, CEOs, former police officers. I mean, like, it's the act of using cannabis has nothing to do with your profession. It has nothing to do with your religion. It has nothing to do with the way you were raised. It has nothing to do with anything besides the fact that you want to try something that might enhance your life, and that's it.
The idea that like people stop doing something after college. Okay, maybe if you were like doing blow every day in college and then you become a normal person. Okay, I can see that, and hopefully you're able to do that, right? A lot
of people
meet
aren't. That guy.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't. But like, you see people like kind of leave some things behind.
Of course.
But like, when people go to college, like, do they, unless they become an alcoholic or something like that, aside, like, do they leave alcohol behind when they leave? No. Like, what are they going to do? Leave weed behind? Like, that was crazy to me. And and it shouldn't have been shocking at all. It shouldn't have been shocking. But one of the quote unquote shocking things in my first couple years out in the real world after college was, I worked at a bank, and I was a private banker working with people handling a lot of money. And, I'd meet all different types of people, but I was in New York City, like, hobnobbing with guys at investment banks and shit, like all these traditional places. And it would shock me how many people would have openly like talk about it. And it's not everyone, but they'd have joints sitting right in their desk. And it's like, this guy works at Bank X, right? And he's just sitting there with like 3 joints in his desk. And it also goes to your original point as to how unbalanced the legal action on this stuff is, because one of the things that bothers the hell out of me is you see in a lot of poor communities, even regardless of race, but let's call it what it is, like in a lot of urban communities with minority communities, you will see people, a kid arrested with a joint at 15, and now he's fucked. Because he's already from nothing, now he's tagged as that. Now it's like you're pushing these cycles to continue, and eventually that kid might become a guy who's the missing father in a fatherless household because he's in jail for something stupid, and then eventually maybe it gets serious because now his life is crime because that's what society made him, you know. And that, to me, not that I blame the guy sitting there with joints in his desk, like I think he should totally be allowed to do that, but I had a big problem with the double standard I saw, and frankly, like, we still have the system set up that's still how it is, even though it's more lax than it was 5 years ago. No question, there's still the ability to do that in a lot of places. You know,
it's still happening. You know, people are still getting arrested. All right, I'll give you a stat. In Pennsylvania in 2020, 20,000 plus people were arrested for low-level cannabis offenses.
Can you define low level?
Simple possession, having a piece in their car, getting, you know, smoking and driving and getting a DUI.
What do you think? What do you think the average? Like, let's just play a quick game. You don't have to be exact at all. What do you think the average fine of those 20,000 people was?
I have no idea.
$200, something like that.
I couldn't tell. I have no idea. I don't know.
Let's be conservative and call it a low number.
Yeah.
Let's say it's $100.
I mean, I would say, like, it's got to be probably closer to like 500, because they're gonna do, like, if they get you with weed, they're gonna get you with a bunch of other shit.
Okay, well let's not even count that. Let's be totally conservative here, and let's just say it's $200, right? 20,000 cases in one state, $200. What's 20,000 times 100? Is that
2 million?
Yeah, 2 million. Okay, so 4 million. That's $4 million in revenue. Click. Like going through an Easy Pass toll for the state.
I mean, the state makes money every time someone who's in jail makes a phone call.
Yeah.
I mean, so, like, yeah, how does government have revenue centers to contribute to the business they're running? Well, they got to find the ways to do it. So that's where, you know, when you have a change in the law and you go from legal or illegal to legal, you gotta retrain, you know, police. You gotta re-educate on how they're going to initiate communications, knowing that now the smell of cannabis is not means for search of a car. And this is where you're fucked. If you're driving from New York through Pennsylvania, through New Jersey to Maryland, you know, the smell of marijuana might not be cause for searching your car in New Jersey, but, you know, maybe you're taking a trip from the beach, you know, back up to Philly or the Philly burbs. Who knows? Like,
this is what I mean.
Who knows?
With the state thing.
And it's even crazier state to state, but even within your state. Okay? Philadelphia is a decriminalized city. What does that mean? That means you can have up to roughly an ounce, I think it's 30 grams, on you, and you're not going to get arrested. You'll get a fine, or they'll take your weed, or, you know, or they'll just say, you know, get the fuck out of here. But if you go outside of Philadelphia and you cross into Montgomery County or Bucks County or any of the surrounding counties, if you have a crumb in your car that they deem is marijuana after pulling you over, and you're dumb enough to say something about that you use it or whatever it might be, you're fucked.
Yeah.
Even in Pennsylvania and most states, if you use marijuana, and so, for example, me and you hang out last night, you know, till 10 o'clock, we smoked a joint. I left, I went home. The next day, I'm driving, yada, 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 get pulled over. They're like, it smells like weed in here. And you're like, oh, it's okay. I'm a medical marijuana patient. you just got a DUI.
Really?
Yep. Yours.
You got a DUI if it smelled like weed in there, and you said I'm a medical marijuana patient.
Because now they know you are. And now they know when they take you in to test your blood, you're going to come up hot for weed.
And if any's in there,
amount of THC is in your blood, you're a DUI. So, wow. I mean, that is where, you know, I work with a law firm, CDM Law. We partnered with Cresco Labs and another law firm, PKN Law. And at our weekly events, we tie in a lot of education. But one of our events this month on August 18th, we're doing an expedited expungement and pardon initiative, because this is where it is unbelievably complicated, bro. Where sometimes all the knowledge I have in my brain, it's like a lot. And I appreciate this podcast right now because it's really making me realize some stuff.
No, thank you for doing it, man. This has been really great so far.
And I appreciate being here. But it's like there's so much involved in this that it's like we're trying to help people expunge and clear their records of nonviolent cannabis offenses. So, for example, the 20,000 plus people who got jammed up in PA in 2020, at a certain point would be able to get this expunged or pardoned from their record, given the initiative in place by Governor Wolf and Lieutenant Governor Fetterman. They have an expedited initiative to pardon and expunge low-level nonviolent cannabis offenses.
That's good.
This company, Cresco, and their foundation, Seed, is offering to cover the costs of the expungement pardon process for people who come to the events to get educated and connect with the attorneys, or are able to discover this information by following my platform or the platforms that are promoting this, connect with us, and then we, can push them in the right direction. Because like what you said, the investment banker who has his joints in his desk and it's okay, and he's never going to go to jail. He could smoke that outside and the cop will probably wave walking by.
Yep.
There's a huge disconnect between the young kid in the hood who has the same mentality, who just wants to get away and have a smoke and clear their head, or relax their mind, or whatever it might be. That kid's gonna get a fucking charge.
Yeah.
That kid's gonna probably get jammed up in one way or another, and that will follow them. And then you can't get jobs, you can't get housing, you can't get loans, you can't do this.
It's a cycle.
You can't do that. And it's vicious.
Yep.
And it's absolutely vicious. And that's where the brand, Jewish Sauce Boss, is here to be a conduit for anyone we can in this industry. We want people to be able to come to us and say, hey, I need help with this, or I need help with that, or how do I do this, or what's going on here. And that's where, our consulting practice really thrives. We teach people how to use cannabis. We teach people how to consume cannabis. We bring people to our events. Next thing I know, they're like, oh, I've been thinking about starting this business, this brand, or, I've actually been working with this company for a while. Like, what do you think we should do? Or it's just really unique position to be in.
That partnership, though, I'm curious about that. Where you were talking about, I think it was two different law firms and you. And so you used the example of the 20,000 people who were arrested for something stupid in Pennsylvania last year. If they come to you guys, the one firm covers all their expenses.
So the grower processor, which is Cresco Labs,
right?
Their foundation's called Seed. Seed is focused this summer on an expedited expungement initiative. It's a social justice movement.
So I guess my question would be, I think I understand why they're doing it, but tell me if I'm wrong here. Essentially, it's like a great, well, they get to do a good thing. They get to help people out, but it's also for an enormous brand awareness opportunity. That's where, they're paid in money, that they're covering the money for these people. That's like a marketing investment in that way. So the people are like, oh, Cresco helped me out with this. Oh, look at what Cresco's doing. They started this movement, which is a good thing. Exactly. So it's for like goodwill in that way.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay.
And that's where you have corporate cannabis.
Yeah.
Corporate cannabis is a lot at times. And, for me, when I work with a company like Cresco or I work with one of these massive companies, it's very intentional, right? I'm working with them because of what you just said and outlined, pretty articulately. They are going to cover the costs of the work that the attorneys would do to help people get their record expunged and cleared. So if someone comes in, they're like, hey, I got a possession charge, or all the way up to selling hundreds of pounds, whatever it might be, and you get jammed up, you can talk to these attorneys and they're going to figure out a plan of action. They're going to cost it out. This company's going to cover it. They're going to get help. It's a great symbiotic relationship with everyone involved.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, the corporate cannabis companies, they'll be a little trepidatious of the brand Jewish sauce boss, because we're doing things in a very intentional way. We're very focused on how we operate and how we move and what we say and what we do and the lifestyle we showcase. And I didn't create this brand for anyone. I created this brand to help people and solve problems, not to cater or not be the fullest, truest version of myself and what this brand is and embodies. So, for example, in Pennsylvania, you're not allowed to smoke your medical marijuana. In the language of the law, it says you're not allowed to combust your cannabis.
Wait, really?
Yep. It's the dumbest shit in the world.
What the fuck do you do?
You're supposed to vaporize it only. And even to go back a little bit, in Pennsylvania, when they first started the medical program, they sold products, but one of the only products they didn't sell was the flower. And then they had to have a committee make a decision to allow the sales of flower, which was actually a strategic plan by the senator who wrote the bill, because he knew the Republican senators would push back on the fact that selling flowers to, this is crazy. We're selling flower at the dispensary. So he built in a mechanism for a committee that he knew would vote in favor of selling actual flower to the patients. And now they got hella fire weed in Pennsylvania. That's all I could say. Our medical marijuana in Pennsylvania is fire. If you get the right grower.
So wait, that was at the state level?
Yep, state level. That's what I mean. This shit's crazy. It is so bureaucratic in government, and then the bureaucracy over at the corporate cannabis level is wild as well, because I want to work with these companies, right? The Crescos, the big brands, right? Because we're certifying patients to get their card.
But they also want people that look a certain way too.
Yeah,
that's why
and they don't want you to, and they don't want you to smoke weed.
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, what are you smoking on your Instagram page? Well, maybe it's CBD, maybe it's hemp, maybe it's weed.
Don't worry about it.
Maybe it's just nothing anyone needs to worry about, because it's more about the context than the content. You need to understand the context of what is happening within the content. And if you just want to look at the content, you're going to miss the mark. And I'm totally cool with that.
I like that. That's good. I'm going to use that.
Use it. I probably stole that from Gary Vee or some shit.
Maybe.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, and it's true. And it's real. It's just so real. It's like, I've had it in so many different moments. People are like, you smoke. I'm like, okay. What?
It's out there.
I'm like, what do we need to discuss? What do we need to know? Like, yes, a joint was smoked. And then at times I'm like, how big do you need to get? How many people do you need to help? How many things do you need to do before it doesn't matter. Like, certain people do shit, it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? But that level of fame and celebrity and influence, it's just another level and tier of life to where you can do this because you make a lot of people a lot of money. And it's like, for me, I can't help but be myself.
Well, you're an individual specialized house. You're not a corporation. And the unfortunate thing, and this is the reality in everything, no matter what it is, the larger the group of people around one common goal gets, the more fun gets sucked out of the situation. Because the more people cooking the meal, the more problems that happen with the meal. And this is the problem with like a big corporate environment. And then it starts to become also, you know, the bigger you get, the bigger the target on your back. The bigger the target your back, the more lawyers you hire. The more lawyers you hire, the more regulations you self-impose. The more regulations you self-impose, the more you check yourself on everything you do. And the more you check yourself on everything you do, the less fun there is in any type of situation that happens there. That is the God's honest truth. And unfortunately, it's not going to be any different with weed, as we're already being able to tell. But like on the actual, speaking of like the big corporations themselves, I just remembered when you were talking there that, and I can't believe I didn't bring this up earlier when we were talking about the lobbyist money and the fact that all these other industries, be it private prisons, alcohol, they outnumber even the lobbyists in a major now burgeoning industry like weed. I forgot, though, that all of these alcohol companies, because, you know, they can read data just like you and I can, not all of them, but a lot of them are heavily, directly invested in marijuana now. Molson Coors, Constellation Brands. Oh, and I'm going to miss some of the other names, but you know how all these holding companies own like all the beer we drink on a mainstream level. You know,
Southern Wine and Spirits, I believe, has the biggest distribution of cannabis in Canada, which is an alcohol company. Like so it's like,
so why hasn't it moved along more?
So for federal legalization in Canada, and I'm not too well versed on this, but when it went federal, you got to think of, you know, infrastructure and logistics and location. So I remember hearing this or seeing this, but I believe it's Southern Wine and Spirits of Canada is the biggest distributor of legalized cannabis, because the majority of that cannabis is sold in stores ran by the government.
There it is. They're in bed with them. So, and it's
like Pennsylvania. The state stores are government run. Well, that's a government run. The fine wine and spirits.
Canada's the wild, wild west with this. Like, Canada's behind on a lot of shit, and like their government does a lot of crazy shit. But the one thing that they've been out in front on is weed, which I need to look into a lot more myself, because there's always a catch with this stuff. Let's be honest. But you know, here to the point like that's still, there's so much inertia. There's so much stopping things from being allowed to happen that also, like, we're falling behind Canada in some of the ability to, like, distribute and mass scale. I think, isn't like Tilray out of Canada? Yeah. So, what's the other one? CBC or
there's so many.
Canopy
right
Growth.
Canopy Growth, Tilray.
There's a bunch of them. So, you know,
Altria.
It is crazy. Altria, yep. Like, it is crazy to me that because the alcohol industry is behind it, because they know where this is going, that we haven't seen that start to shift yet, that power balance. And again, I forgot this earlier. And now I kind of wonder, like, because it is a follow the money situation like everything else, I wonder when that's going to break through, and if it's just at this point an issue with, like, let's just look at DC, for example, how much they're wondering, like, all right, how much are we going to take our taste on this? And how long can we hold off to where we put the sales tax, you know, to 30% instead of 15%? And like, the Republicans have been historically very, very behind on this. Now you have a few who are starting to, you know, see the light, as I say. The Democrats have been out in front of this for years, like, hey, let's legalize it. But the thing that has been pissing me off there is they're so concerned with that sales tax. And like, there was legislation introduced last year, I think it was last year, where they wanted to grow it. Like, they would only allow it, certain things to happen in this country if they could do a slow hike of the sales tax from like 10 to maybe it was 25 or 30%, something like that. So to me, I'm kind of wondering when these companies are going to make the little handshake deal behind the scenes and be like, this is what it is. And at least, even though as a society, we're going to lose something, because we're going to give up, we're going to pay more bullshit for something we shouldn't have to pay bullshit on every time we buy it. At least we'll get an instantaneous kind of drop of like mass adoption. And now states also will have to kind of get with the program.
It's I mean, the fact that government and business is so interconnected is a fact of life. You know what I mean? And it's funny at times, right? Like my background before being full time, and what I do now is the casino business. So
that's interesting.
So, I've talked to people about this before, right? There used to be Vegas and Atlantic City. And before that, gambling was illegal.
Yes.
And the people that took care of gambling as a business and provided the services that were needed were organized crime, were, whatever it would be, right? And that's why organized crime was thriving in those eras, because they would take the risks on the businesses and the industries that everybody desired, that everybody wanted, but the government wasn't ready to pass legislation or legalize it.
Prohibition, dude.
It all comes back to prohibition, right? And when I was in college, I wanted to work, I studied hospitality, I worked in restaurants from 16 to 26, hotels, nightlife, casinos, the whole 9 yards. And it was just something I really enjoyed. So I went into work in the casino business. And
what were you doing there?
First was an internship in Atlantic City, worked at a beach bar, super fun.
What bar?
It was called the Trump Plaza Beach Bar.
So that's not there anymore, right?
No, they actually demolished that casino this year, which is kind of funny. And that was an amazing experience, like working on a beach bar at 20, internship, learning, being in a casino environment. It was really, really cool. And then after college, I went and I worked at the Valley Forge Casino Resort in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania.
That was one of the first ones, no?
That was, no, not in PA. They put a casino in there. That building was there. So it was a hotel and it was a convention center. And then they took one of the convention center floors and put a casino in it. So I got to start working there as a food and beverage manager. And it was a cool gig. And I always knew when I worked in Atlantic City that Pennsylvania was going to thrive. Like I remember when I was a kid and there was no casinos in Pennsylvania and everyone went to Atlantic City. I was always like, this is crazy. Why don't we have casinos? And then in the early 2000s, you started to see it happen. Some casinos came online. And then after a while, it used to be Vegas was the number one gaming market. Atlantic City was number 2. Pennsylvania became the number 2 gambling market in the United States behind Las Vegas and surpassed Atlantic City after like a decade of having casinos.
PA effectively, and I think the data backs this as you're alluding to, PA, in my opinion, effectively killed Atlantic City as we know it. Mm-hmm. Because, it used to be the hour-long down 42, the expressway if you're coming from like Philly, or down the Parkway for 2 hours, 15 minutes from New York City. Mm-hmm. And now it's like, you're in New York City, you can at least hit the place in Yonkers. If you're in Philadelphia, there's there's what, like 3 on the river right there?
They just opened up a new casino, Philadelphia Live. And yeah, it's beautiful. And it's just like anything else. There's huge money in gambling. Like there's huge money in vices, like kind of to allude what you said.
But the government gets their taste.
Dude, I remember when I first started working at the Valley Forge Casino, I think it was 55 cents out of every dollar that went into a slot machine went back to the government. And then table games was 14 cents on the dollar. So every time money was exchanged, people made money. And what I learned from that in a way is if you can have a business that brings substantial value to the government, it's a good business to be in. Because if you can entertain and have people have a good time, provide excellent service, leave them with an experience that they loved, and every time they spend money in your casino, you're making the state and the government money, you're doing something well. And it's a similar position I'm in a much smaller scale with getting people their medical marijuana card. Because to get your medical marijuana card, the card itself, there's a fee, a yearly fee you pay to the state.
How much is that?
It's $50.
That's actually not horrible, but
it's not bad. And the nice thing about it is every dispensary has doctors and pharmacists within their dispensary, and you can consult with them and talk to them on site.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's really cool.
That is cool.
Yeah, it's cool. And these people, a lot of them really want to help, and they really love cannabis, and they believe in the medicine and the products that they're selling to the patients. And it's pretty cool.
What about the smoking aspect of it, though? And this is something that, frankly, I should do much more research into, and I don't, because it's top of mind. If you talk to the average person, who just enjoys weed, like, recently we've seen a lot of other ways for it to happen. The edibles and smaller dosage edibles are everywhere and things like that. But people, it's still like you smoke weed. It's the most common thing. And obviously, the idea of smoke itself is not good for your body, period, right? But, we have tobacco legalized, and we all know the science supports this completely. The effects of that versus the effects of weed smoke, it's not even close. Like, it's far worse to smoke tobacco, and especially all the things that they put in those products. But, it is still, you are inhaling something that's not meant to be in your body. And past studies I've looked at, they're probably a little biased towards weed, admittedly, and I haven't looked at this in a while, but they show that there's not a strong correlation of long-term things like lung cancer and things like that are associated with weed. However, if you talk to a lot of doctors, or you talk to especially like a pulmonologist or something like that, who, in fairness to them, is literally their job to like look at lungs. So I understand their position, things like that. They're going to be like, it's horrible for you. And here's all the cells, cancerous cells it can cause. Like, here's how it happens, whatever. Like, how do you get around that when, again, it is a plant, and we should all agree, I should say, that is a natural thing that we should be able to consume. But, what if there are people coming back at you like, hey, agree, but we shouldn't smoke it?
I think that when you begin to understand that some people respond only to a smokable product, then you got to allow people to make the decision in how they're going to consume their medication. You need to be knowledgeable to know that, okay, smoking probably isn't great in general. And to deduct that and move into a regimen with cannabis that's good for you is a thing you got to, take upon yourself, right? Like, I know a lot of people who don't smoke and love edibles. You know what I mean? And I know other people who only vape. And I know other people that only smoke. And other people just use a tincture. Some people only want to get products that are, because, the Bengay is not working anymore. So the THC lotion and the combination of CBD and THC you get from the dispensary helps mitigate that knee pain.
Question on that, actually. A little sidebar.
Yeah.
I've never used that or had to use that. When you rub, like with the THC heavy ones, when you rub that on you, you don't get high from that.
No, it doesn't get you high at all. No, not
I don't know
that.
if it's like sinking in your pores or some shit, but
no, that doesn't get you high. It's just a very soothing, feeling on the, like, for me, right? Like, I get a lot of tension in this area, like in my body. So like, I'm constantly putting that lotion there.
Point to your neck for people
Yeah,
listening.
like neck and shoulder area. Just like it's where I carry the stress. And what I like to do is take a shower at night. Get ready. Right after that, put it on and just let that like soothe in, and it feels great. It just feels really good, and it's relaxing and doesn't get you high. But I'm usually medicating, when I'm using the product. So it's beneficial to me. I really like it. It helps a lot of the people within our community. And there's other ones too. Like, there's ones with more CBD than THC. Some people just don't want that much THC. And there's other lotions and transdermals that can get you medicated. It's just a matter of what it's made with and the absorption method into the body.
It's like anything. It's different strokes, different folks.
And that's the funniest thing about it, right? Like I said before, like someone could use a cannabis product and it makes them energetic. Same person or a different person uses the same product, they're like ready to take a nap.
That's actually, and this is related to that, but I'm going down a little rabbit hole here. That is another thing that makes it a little difficult to gauge, and I'll explain what I mean by that. If someone consumes alcohol, right? If I consume wine or I consume whiskey, I get different kinds of feelings and different kinds of drunk. But at the end of the day, based on the amount I drink of of content of alcohol in it, my blood alcohol level can be measured. So if I'm at 0.04 and I drive, I'm okay. If I'm at 0.10, I'm getting arrested. With weed, like I'll just use a bullshit college example. Like in college when we had, different people volunteering to designated drive for a night or something, which was always great. We never had a problem. Mm-hmm. Like honestly, never had a problem with people getting in the car drunk, which was awesome. But like when you designated drove, a lot of times you'd smoke, right? Mm-hmm. That's just what you did for the night, for whatever. And you're fine. Like for people that did that, and I haven't driven after smoking weed since college, so I can't speak to this recently. But like, you were fine as long as you weren't like taking 12 bong rips right before. You were fine. Edibles, different story. Now I've never driven on edibles, but I've been in a car like on an edible in college, and like the wheel can come out at you a little bit. You know what I mean? Yeah. So my point here is, it's very hard, and this is where, not to defend the government or whatever, but I understand with some regulation around like driving and stuff like that, it's very hard to gauge, A, how much someone is going to respond to a drug in a different way, the weed, in a different way, and B, the method of consumption. You understand what I'm saying? It's not apples to apples across the board.
Yeah, no, I mean, yes. Listen, smoking and driving, if you like doing it, just be safe, but it's not smart. And at the end of the day, getting behind the wheel after you take an edible is not a good idea. Yeah. It's like, it's definitely not a good idea, especially because edibles are very inaccurate with their dosing, and the outcome and the effect, you're really going to have no ability to predict it. So I would encourage any edible experiences to be done at home, or if you're like at a concert and like you're like in a experience where like you can safely get home afterward. But yeah, it's like you need people to allow the industry to progress. So you need to create labeling and standards and set it up like you set up anything else. Like when you open a pack of candy, on the back you have the nutritional facts, and it says this many milligrams of sugar and this many milligrams of sodium, and that's how it should be. It's like the professionalism needs to come up. But in California, you have edibles that are, that it looks like an artisan chocolate from France with the packaging and the labeling and the ingredients. How
do they get away with it? I'm curious about that, because you would think, especially with something like this, it's going to be under scrutiny. I don't know how they get away with the whole like, all right, well, we're saying there's X amount of milligrams in this, but there might be this amount. You know what I mean? Like when you drink a Corona, You know it's 4.5 or whatever it is. You know, I appreciate that. You know what you're getting.
Yeah.
It is still, as you pointed out, there's a lack of predictability with edibles in regulated open markets, like most common example, like Colorado. And I'm shocked that they do get away with that.
Mm-hmm. It's because it's hard to regulate. You know, a lot of people get edibles from who they get their edibles from. You know, buying a pack of edibles in a dispensary is usually really, really expensive. But most people get edibles on the traditional market, or a friend makes you some edibles or brownies or cookies or
That was the best.
or whatever it is. Yeah, the good times.
Firecrackers, the good old days.
Firecrackers. Bringing me back.
That was some shit, man.
Yeah, that was crazy. That was like a quick way to make an edible without having to go through the whole process.
Yeah. So, well, you know, speed and comfort, as they say.
Yes.
But when you think about, we keep referring to that like legacy market, which I think I'm going to use that now. That's good.
Yeah.
Over black market. That's way better.
Yeah.
But like the legacy market, one of the things that should be paid attention to, that should also make a way bigger argument for massive legalization of this stuff, is the fact that especially now, it's kind of scary because you don't know what you're buying. And it doesn't mean like the guy who's giving it to you is bad either. Mm-hmm. He may not know either, you know? And my eyes were really open to this about 4 or 5 years ago when I didn't really know this kid, but a friend of a friend who I had at least met before. And it wasn't, in fairness, it wasn't involving weed, but he bought, I think he was buying like a basic drug, like maybe, I don't even think it was MDMA. It was something a lot less. And he got sold fentanyl and he died, you know, which is terrifying. But then Joe Rogan, a couple years ago, I think this was, he had on a guy who by accident wrote a book called Fentanyl Inc., which I still have to read. I haven't read it, but it was an amazing podcast I'd encourage people to listen to. This guy was a culture reporter, like he was a music reporter. And he was doing some kind of story, I think on like an artist or something, and somehow came across like some crazy wild story about someone who had overdosed on fentanyl, and then looked at one thing, which led to another and another. And he ended up doing his full investigation on this, and he even like went undercover to China. I mean, it was really amazing what he did. And he saw all drugs, like everything, not just weed, like all this stuff, where fentanyl's getting put into the product. And actually it was more in things like cocaine and stuff like that. But it's scary to me that we still have to operate in places where people are forced to buy their weed off of a regulated market, and they may, you know, just be some guy who's looking for their joint for the weekend. And I'm not saying this happens a lot, but like it happens sometimes. You know, you get something that's laced with heroin or it's laced with fentanyl. And to me, like, I'm not a parent at this point, but I know when I'm a parent, if we don't have a change here, and I think we're going to by that time, but I'm just saying, hypothetically, if we didn't, that'd be a scary thing for me to think about. Mm-hmm. It's scary, like me thinking about it. Like if I ever have some, like technically, you know, you don't know.
I mean, listen, the shitty thing about weed is you usually have to buy it from a drug dealer if you're not in a legal market. And if you know anything about sales, if you sell weed and you also sell other drugs, when you have someone come and buy their eighth of weed, as a good salesman, you would say, yo, you need any Molly? You need any Coke? You need any this? You need any that? You need this or that? And that's been a huge problem. And that's where the demonization of cannabis falls in line with, you know, drug culture at times, because you can listen, everyone's one step away from not having weed from their guy. You know? Like it's real. You know, I'm very fortunate. I know a lot of people, but like a lot of people get their weed from someone, and a lot of people, like you said, after college, they think they can't smoke weed anymore. It's like it can't have it a part of their lifestyle. It's like a thing you only do in college. And a lot of the time I think people just change it up, move away, and they don't have access like they used to.
Sure. College, it's amazing. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And it's like, it sucks, because that concept of people who buy weed and they don't have their, like in Pennsylvania, if you don't have your medical marijuana card, the only way you can get your weed is if someone's mailing it to you or you buy it from your dealer. And I don't think there's anything wrong if you have a great relationship with someone that you trust and who has your best interests in mind as well. Because there's really good people out here who sell weed, who care about the products they sell, who know they're getting good products, who've been doing this for a long time, and it is what it is.
They may not, but that's the thing though, and they may be a great person, but they may not even know because they're unless they're growing it themselves, and this is the problem. They're still technically getting it from somewhere. Maybe they've been getting it from a reliable place for 10 years, and then one day that place, distributor, whoever it is, buys it from the wrong person. That sucks. And like, to me, when I hear, one of the things that pisses me off is when I hear like all the anti-drug advocates pointing this out correctly, I might add, and I appreciate they pointed out, they then point it out as a reason to ban more. And I'm like, well, all right, if we were talking heroin or something, we can have that argument. But like, no, the opposite. Because guess what? People aren't going to stop smoking weed. They're not going to stop appreciating having THC. So you're just going to force them to get it more there. You're also going to take away complete control of the marketplace. And like, it's a similar argument you can, and albeit at a much smaller numerical scale, but it's a similar argument you could get into with guns. Like if you ban guns, I mean, bad guys don't listen to laws. You know what I mean? And so I look at it the same way across the board. I'm like, well, why the fuck is it different here?
If you ban something, it's just someone will take the risk to provide it. That's just history.
It's called human nature.
Yeah, we've seen that in history time and time again. I mean, even to this day, gun running is one of the biggest activities of any organized crime, whether it's an organized crime in this area of life or this area of life. That's a huge, huge business. Same with transporting cannabis. Like, how do people think their cities get the products there? Like, no, like the general weed smoker never takes a second to think how this got to me.
Yeah.
They don't sit there and be like, well, wow, this was grown on a farm or in an indoor facility. And then, okay, well, was this grown with care? Was this grown with standards? Was this grown with pesticides? Was this grown, with whatever? Was it treated properly? Was it cured properly? How is this done? And then after it gets grown and it gets all, bagged out and together, then how many times has it changed hands? How many hands have been in that product and have touched it? How many times has it fallen on the floor? How many times have you bought in your weed from a dealer and there's a hair in it? I mean, it is what it is. It's an unregulated market. And that's why the people who do it really well in an unregulated market, usually people who do it well in cannabis hold it to a decent standard because they wouldn't be in the game for a good amount of time. You have to care about the end user. If you are someone who wants to be the man and whatever, all right, you're listening to this, you're doing your thing, you sell weed, you're selling your, making your money. You have to care about the end user. It's the same thing I say when I talk to a company who has millions of dollars and is legal to sell weed. Do you give a shit about the patients that come in here?
Yeah.
Do you care about the person who's using your product? Do you care about what they're going to say to their friends? Do you care if they're going to say, yo, I got the Cresco Lime Sorbet, you got to get this shit, to their homie who doesn't even have a card? Then they're going to be like, wow, that shit is fire. I need to get my card. and they get their card and they go to the dispensary.
And that is at least the good side of like corporate culture. Like, let's talk about I talked about the negatives earlier. Yep. I always will. But when you have that and you do have a level of regulation on it, and you know, like, well, they got their public brand behind this, and if they fucked up, they're done. Mm-hmm. Like, they're out. They're out of business. They're all going to jail too. There's a level of trust there. Mm-hmm. And like, even to what you're saying though, the more links in the chain you add, all it takes is one. And that's the issue. I think there are a lot of people in those chains on the legacy market who do care about the end user. Mm-hmm. But like, I'll take it away from weed for a second and use an example I know well. You know, you look at cocaine. Politico did a phenomenal story. This has got to be like 5-6 years ago now. I saw this, and now it just is more. It's more prescient at the moment. You'll understand why in a second. But like, Hamas, who has effectively like hijacked Palestine and is now firing all these bombs into Israel, and there's all kinds of issues going back and forth there, which is a whole separate thing. But like, that organization, they fund a lot of what they do off of being, I think, the largest, but I'll hedge and say one of the largest cocaine distributors in the world. And their cocaine trail goes from the Middle East through all kinds of batshit whatever the fuck in Africa to the United States. Through the United States, it involves used cars. Through the United States and used cars that they send from Africa back through Mexico to then launder, I'm going to fuck up how to explain this, but re-launder the cars back through Africa so that they can reuse them and continue to siphon cocaine into the country. Now, do you think that a bunch of blow hidden in shoddy used cars running across Africa on, I don't know, like caravans or some shit, has any level of systemized purity to it, when the organization who's doing it doesn't give a fuck about the end user? They're trying to fund themselves. You know what I mean? And so when I look at this, again, I could make this argument all day for people, and I'm sorry if I'm pounding away at it, but when I see things that should be common sense, not treated as common sense, it bothers me. Mm-hmm. And that's like a hard drug, right? Like, when you're talking about weed, a lot of it is not as convoluted as that example, but it's still like, you know, comes from the cartels in Mexico, who last I checked aren't, you know, they're not very nice people, you know?
No, they're not. And thankfully that their weed businesses have definitely gone down, given how much of a market there is and surplus there is of product in states like Oregon and Washington and California. And the majority of the cannabis you smoke in a state or an area that doesn't have legalization is coming from California. Mm-hmm. That's where it comes from. You know, that's where most of the cannabis is grown. That's where the environment's right to grow it. You know, whether it's outdoor, indoor, you name it, you get the majority of the cannabis you're consuming from California. And that's why it's really important to see, as we grow into an industry, what it'll look like when California can actually ship their cannabis to other states within the United States, or export their cannabis to other countries. Because most people say the best weed's grown in California, Humboldt County.
Cali Kush. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to look up while you're speaking here. I don't know if I'll be able to. This is the kind of data that, like, on the show, usually I can't find because it's very, very exact. Mm-hmm. But I'd love to know the percentage, and it's going to be an estimate that's wrong, but, you know, if we could get a ballpark, a study of the percentage of weed that's consumed in this country that emanates from California.
It's the majority. It's the majority.
It's above 50, you think?
I would think so, yeah.
That's to me, that's good. That's good.
I would definitely say it's above that, because, like, it's almost hard to get really bad weed now. Like, I remember when I was like 18, you could get mids, like seedy sticks, like give you a headache after you took a gravity bong hit, because that's what you did with mids. And it's like the level and sophistication of cannabis now is so interesting. You know, you have people who can grow outdoor that looks as great as indoor weed. You have people that are doing indoor weed that doesn't look as good as outdoor weed. It's a really, really wild time. And it just comes down to, how do we change the laws? How do we advocate and educate and get to the point where we change it? Because my dad is 77. My dad has been smoking weed for 50 plus years. He is a G. He's a musician, and he's one of the coolest dudes I know. And he laughs every time we talk. And, you know, I'm like, oh, they're like talking about federally legalizing it. He just like, he'll just literally smoking.
Yeah,
like,
okay.
He's like, my dad calls me Willie. He's like, Willie, they were saying that shit 50 years ago. He's like, we still here. He's like, there's been progress. I'm not gonna knock it. There's been progress, but they say the same shit all the time, and it rarely changes. And the only way to have it change is if we hopefully will vote people in that want to see this change, and get the other people who have no desire to allow it to change out. They don't care. They can get weed. They're not going to jail for weed. They don't care about all these people that are in jail for weed. They don't care. They don't care. If you smoke weed, if you smoke weed, send an email to someone in your community who represents you or legislates for you and writes laws, and tell them that you want everyone in jail for cannabis offenses to be out. That would be a good use of your time if you get high and love weed. It's like one of the best uses of your time. If you want to be in the cannabis industry, you want to start your cannabis brand, you want to be the man, you want to show how much weed you smoke, you want to say, I got the best nugs or whatever. All of it to me is cool. I fuck with it all. But please use your voice if you still have one for the people who don't. Because there's a lot of people in jail who don't get to do the stuff I get to do every day, which is smoke weed and talk about weed and run a business and a company that promotes removing and ending the stigma of cannabis. That, if you had to say, what is Jewish Sauce Boss? It's a company to end the stigma of cannabis. Mic drop.
I do really appreciate how you put your money where your mouth is with this, you know, because it seems to me like obviously you have the main focus of providing medical marijuana cards and everything as you've covered. And also, like you said, there's so many different things to attack and help with in the whole industry and bringing it to the mainstream that, like, if you tried to do all of them, you'd have nothing. So I'm sure it's like, you want to do this, you want to do that, but you can't. But if you are going to hone in on like something to put next to that as like a value add, you know, you talked about putting out your own brand and like your own feelings and spirituality and things like that. But also, you know, that education arm that you've hit on time and time and time again. I think that's a great place to start. And the reason I say money where your mouth is because we do still see the people who were victim of the past precedents, as you pointed out. And one of the things I will give Trump some credit on that he did that I hope does continue is, and I don't know if he was doing it for political points or because he felt passionate about it, but he did try to help out a lot of people who were a part of like archaic weed laws and stuff. And I think like Kim Kardashian was someone who would really push that, and like some celebrities and stuff. So that was good. But I'd like to see that continue because I'm tired of seeing cases where you see someone, and let's call it what it is. It's usually someone from like a poor urban community who, you know, 30 years ago was selling weed to survive, and they're in jail for life. And yet, you know, a little unrelated, but not really, like on a smaller scale, another example we saw just several weeks ago that blew my fucking mind and pissed me off was where you saw ShaCarri Richardson get banned from the Olympics for smoking weed, which I guarantee you probably half the fucking athletes do. That might be mean to say, but a lot of them do, right? And maybe it was dumb that she smoked it knowing she was going to get tested. Okay, I could argue with that. She's 21. We've all been 21. Like, we do not smart stuff. But what really pissed me off is that when they got to the Olympics, there was like some sort of like conference set up where Megan Rapinoe, the soccer player, and I think another soccer player were there hawking their fucking
CBD
marijuana company. And it's like, wait a second. That's not even where you want to say read the room. That's where you want to say, are you fucking kidding me?
It sucks. It's trash, and it's ultimately like these celebrated white women have a CBD brand, and it's hemp, and it's this and it's that, and you have a young, talented, incredibly, successful woman in ShaCarri Richardson who chose to use cannabis because she was delivered some news from a reporter that her biological mother died, who she was not raised by. She was raised by her grandmother. That news was given to her by a reporter. So then she said and decided that I smoked weed to help manage and deal with what I was going through. She is an amazing human being to get berated and be put on Good Morning America and have to apologize for not doing anything. It's sad. It's sad. It's sad the way you berate someone who's celebrated and championed, and a moment's indiscretion is going to be with her for forever because she faced something that no 21-year-old probably knew how to mentally, emotionally deal with.
Sure.
And it's just, it's unfortunate that we don't have more compassion and more love in the world to say, damn, you're ShaCarri, like, whoa, you went through something heavy. Like, like this isn't the end of the world. Whatever Olympic Committee rules they want to, enforce and abide by, well, you gotta live and die by your decisions. But that is so awful that they are championing these white women and their CBD company, and dragging through the mud a woman who decided to maybe roll one up and try and be able to compete, given the information she was given and how to mentally get over and, get through it and power through it. So for me, it's like, it's a similar thing, right? There was an epidemic, and there's still a drug epidemic, but in the 80s is when cocaine became real popular. Mm-hmm. And that's also when you saw crack become popular as well. But cocaine was consumed by wealthy white people, and crack cocaine was being consumed by inner city, low income, minorities. When it went from cocaine to this synthesized crack cocaine, I don't know, I've never done it. So there was the demonization of that that subset of people, opposed to the people who have money, who were just, railing lines or doing their thing. These people who smoked the cocaine, well, they're going to jail for a long, long time if you get caught with that. We're going to ruin your life if you get caught with that. We're going to put this all over the inner cities and let people sell it and then get you addicted and then get hooked and put you on this. But if you're rich and you're wealthy and you have a cocaine problem, you get to go to rehab. You get a good lawyer. You get a good lawyer. He's a good person. He's doing, look all the good he's doing. Like, it's a double standard. So it's like,
total double standard.
There's always these double standards of the same substance where that person's skin tone or ethnicity or upbringing lies. It's sad. It sucks. And it goes back to the disparity of drug arrests between, white people and minorities, low income. It's like a 4-to-1 separation. And in some major cities, that can get as high as like 10, 12-to-1 because of the disparity of who's policing a nice neighborhood for a group of kids that might be like out hanging and like someone brought a joint. Not many. There are tons of police in the inner city canvassing these neighborhoods, always looking for something, always having a reason to jam someone up.
Yeah.
And it's really not good. It's not a smart way to enhance community. And the thing is, we need to legalize cannabis because when you legalize cannabis, it reduces the harm within communities. It allows people to move in ways that they're not going to ruin their life. Like if we lived in a society that was progressive and where we should be with weed laws and all this stuff, ShaCarri Richardson would be the spokesperson for the biggest weed brand in the world. She would have endless endorsement deal after endorsement deal after endorsement deal. She would become the champion for an athlete that can smoke weed and win and compete. But instead, we're in this opposite world. This world that, if she would have heard that news, drank a bottle of vodka, ended up driving somewhere, hurting herself and someone else,
if she had done that, she definitely would have been banned.
Would she been banned?
Yeah.
100%?
If she got a DUI and hurt someone else, fuck yeah.
All right.
However, you had me in the first half where I totally agree. If I think if I were choosing someone to get that kind of news and go face a bottle of vodka alone in their house versus have a joint, that's an easy decision what I want them to do.
I agree with that. And it's just like, I don't know where the line stops with whether you're using a substance and you do something dumb and you might hurt yourself or someone else, and hopefully, no one gets, drastically injured, but like you cause an accident, you hurt yourself and someone else, you did something wrong, you made a mistake. Who knows? Like why? Like it's weird. Like for example, I'll give you a quick story. When I came out of college, I failed a hair drug test for marijuana.
A hair drug test?
They took a hair sample and tested it for drugs at a casino for an entry-level job. Okay? So they do the hair test, and mind you, I was aware they might do this, so I bought this shampoo that's supposed to get it out of your system and blah, 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 blah. Hair test. I go through the full orientation, a week of orientation. I go to my first day for this job, and the person who hires me has a look on their face. I can't picture, like, I can't really, understand what's going on. And he says, well, I'm going to say this, but they just made me aware of your drug test results and you failed the hair drug test for marijuana. You can't start today. And I was like, wow, that's the most demoralizing thing I've ever felt. I just graduated college. I just did all the stuff I was supposed to do. Got this job. Now what? I gotta like call my fucking parents and be like, "Hey guys, I failed a hair drug test."
While your dad's
weed.
like ripping a joint, like, "Oh, sorry to hear that, son."
Yeah, and like, it's like, holy shit! It changed my life for a long time, because instead of doing what I was on this plan to do, it sent me back to my roots, and I got a job working at a restaurant, and I was a server, and worked my way back up to getting into a management role, and having to go through the process of passing a drug test again.
It's all for the look. It has nothing to do with the beliefs. It has to do with the look and the look at us. Look at how clean we are as a company and stuff. I had to start, and it's just a similar example. I had to start my job at a bank 7 months later than I wanted to, because when I was 19, I took a fake ID into a bar because I was dating a 21-year-old girl at the time, right? And it got tossed, it was dismissed, right? And then it was expunged. And actually the Pennsylvania courts had a clerical error and didn't fully expunge it, even though it had been told that it was. And to be honest with you, I only went to expunge it because I was like, wait, can I do that? And I asked my dad, who's a lawyer, and he's like, yeah, you can. I said, well, why not? Like, I wasn't even going to do it. Thank God I did. You know what I mean? But I had to start 7 months later because of that, because of an FDIC regulation that was put in. And, you know, anyone I talked to, like even at the FDIC, they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And like, I knew it was going to be fine and I was going to get put through. But it's like, why is that even there in the first place? It's there because people don't want, like, they want to point to a record. Well, we have a number on a page. We have 100% of employees have never been blah, 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 blah. And yet all these people probably did the same shit and didn't get caught for it, or it got expunged or something, or, you know, they didn't, and whatever. You know, if you're 19 years old doing that, that's such a ridiculous sentiment. And to me, I view it the same way with things like weed now. Now, if you want to talk about harder stuff, that's a different story. You know, it is what it is. You deal with it. But, you know, I can say out of the same side of my mouth that these rules are stupid and dated and totally, like, antithetical to what really is going on. But also, like, you know, there is still a level, even though we shouldn't have to deal with it. And I'd say this to you, like, as a kid coming out there, it's like, if you know you're going to get drug tested, obviously you went and bought the shampoo and everything, like, don't fucking do it, you know? And like, for me, I'll even say that, like, was I really thinking about my job when I was 19? Probably not, but I was old enough to have that thought. And it's like, do I need to go in here? No, I do not. I'm going in here because of pussy, right? Like that's like let's be honest. Like, that's stupid, you know? But you do it and then you deal with it later.
Facts.
What you still should be able to say is, like, it probably shouldn't have been a rule in the first place. And, like, you know, to go back to the ShaCarri thing and you talking about how the situation could play out differently if these rules weren't in place, I agree with you. And I think it underscores, like, a point here, and it makes things uncomfortable for some people. I'm never uncomfortable talking about it, but, you know, you have to look at racial issues in the country. And to me, we put it on everything. And I'm always going to attack the middle ground with this, because I think we actually take away from things we should be paying attention to because we try to make everything about race, and I think that's very detrimental to society. However, here's a great example. This is one where it absolutely plays in a role. Now, go away from the ShaCarri thing and look at what you pointed out with the person who gets arrested on Wall Street versus the person who gets arrested for crack. If you don't think that this system, this cycle that we've hit on other points today, is a big problem in our entire system that is absolutely drawn technically on, even if they didn't intend it that way, though I think some of them did, drawn on racial lines, you're crazy. Of course it is. And then you get to see it play out at a smaller scale, like with consequences and the action, but also at a larger scale publicly with ShaCarri. And then, by the way, not for nothing, the, like, woke Megan Rapinoe, who the minute you inject a little economics into it, like, oh, I make money on this, now she doesn't care about racial issues. I'm into people that care about things across the board. I'm into people that are going to be able to have a conversation about things and do it from a level of common sense, but also not being afraid with the uncomfortable conversations. I'm not into people who do it for attention and then actively, whether they realize they're doing it or not, don't have the presence of mind to realize, like, well, I'm fucking playing right into the system I claim to fight against. And to me, like, I'd love to give a platform to that kind of thing in here, where you can see people who, you know, have been affected or had direct witness to, like, the crack cocaine epidemic versus, like, you know, the Wall Street cocaine epidemic and things like that. And what the difference is in how it plays out over time and the money the government makes off of the, I guess, former situation there, you know, as opposed to the latter. It's very sad.
Yeah, it's sad. It's just, I mean, it's just history. It's like, you know, it's just history repeating itself. You know, we want to demonize people for habits and behaviors. So, you know, if you're going to do it this way, well, we're going to make the penalties harder and stricter if you convert that substance to a rock and then consume it, and then you're caught with it. And really all I've seen, right, you know, my mom taught elementary school in inner city Philadelphia for 30 years. So a super interesting moment for me was when she taught first grade, and I was in first grade, and I was in her classroom, and I got to experience what it was like to be, one of the only white kids in a classroom. And for me, it was usually like an opposite,
Yes.
It was, mainly white kids in a classroom and, a couple other kids that, were in there that changed the dynamic. But that moment in her classroom was so eye-opening because I remember, people not having a dad, or like they would like, I would just learn things and like, well, what did it have to do with, or like, why? And it's like drugs, selling shit, doing shit, consuming things, getting lost in this, having no guidance. It's like, it's real. And my mom would always say, like, I want to give these kids the best 8 hours of their day, because they say when they're in my classroom, it's their favorite place to be. And it's like, I really think it comes down to parenting, and it comes down to your parents having the awareness to know what they brought you into. So if your parents can be self-aware enough to know that, hey, we live in a environment that has drugs on the corner, that has an uncle who sells pills or any of this crazy shit, you hopefully have parents who have enough awareness to provide you with an education that they will know to say, hey, stay away from this. This will ruin your life. And it's not going to just ruin your life. It's going to ruin your future. It's going to keep you from your family. It's a lot of shit. So I really believe, even within the circumstances, parents need to have awareness to educate their children on the arena they're in. And it's similar, with me. I'm grateful that I had parents that didn't pull punches, that were real, that told me what we couldn't do within the confines of our family unit. And it helped me. They were great parents. They told me, if you're going to do this, you'll get in trouble. If you do this, you'll fuck up your life.
Yeah.
If you do this, it's not going to end well for you. If you follow that path and what that person's doing, it's not a good move. So I think, like,
you had two parents in the house, though.
Yeah.
So it sounds like they were great parents.
And that's what I'm saying. So it comes down to the parenting. And then when you go into these situations where there's a lot of, fathers missing in the inner city communities because of the things that might have been out of their control that they had to participate in. Because if you have nothing, and you say fuck school, and you don't have a father figure, and your mom might be working 3 jobs,
yeah.
And who is going to influence you? Who is going to guide you? Who is going to push you? Who is going to be that masculine figure in life that either checks you, encourages you, pushes you, makes you aware that you're making mistakes, or whatever it is? And it sucks, and it's just sad, and it's generational, and it's people need to take a stand and make a commitment. But there's so much in it, right? And it's the generations and generations of fatherless kids in the inner city. And I saw it at a young age. That's what I mean. Like, when I was in first grade, in my mom's first grade class, and I saw how differently almost every one of those kids lived, comparative to my privileged ability to be loved and guided by 2 imperfect people, but decided to give me a shot and give me the tools and the information and the guidance I needed. And that's the difference. That the truth, it's all parenting. It's all upbringing. It's all the values you have instilled in you. And that's why anyone who makes it from certain circumstances and overcomes that and gets through it and breaks through and is a model for anyone else, there's not excuses. There's just obstacles that you have to overcome. And if you want something, if you see someone who has a life that you aspire to have, you got to try to figure it out. There's not always answers. You're going to fuck up, you're going to fail, you're going to mess up, but I just really hope that we can find it in our hearts to be more empathetic to people's actual lives and what they went through to come to the present moment that they're in. And if there's an opportunity to help someone or share something with someone or just listen to someone, do it, and it's hard, man. It's just hard.
That experience molded you at a young age. You said you were in the same grade when you were first exposed to that?
I remember going to my mom's school, even young, but I remember it very vividly when I was the same age as her students in her classroom and just observing their reality and their normal and their day-to-day comparatively to my normal, my day-to-day, and my just life. And it was just so surreal, and it was a great moment for me because it was it was gratitude. Yeah. It was you don't choose where you come into the world or who you come into the world to or your family or your circumstances, but it is up to you to take what it is you're given, work through it, and then make some decisions and come up with a plan to either get out of it or not.
You're raising a conundrum. I don't know if that's the word I want to put on it, but that's at least part of it that has come up in some conversations in previous podcasts, but I try to hit on it when it does come up to point out how difficult some of these situations are. And that is this balance, and it's like a left versus right balance too. The balance of you're fucked because of where you come from, and so you're never going to get out of it, so we got to help you, right? Versus the pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And I disagree with both. And I always point this out, and I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so correct me at the end of this if I'm wrong, but you're hitting on the pieces of both themes that I tried to, and I agree with heavily, which is balance. You need to be able to help places, and the government needs to be a part of that don't have the advantages of literally just like the zip code you live in and the number of people who live there and the environment that can or cannot create. You also don't want to totally generalize those populations and say, you don't have the ability to pull yourself up. You don't have the ability to pull yourself out. What about all the people who have? What about all the amazing people in pop culture? Could be CEOs, could be musicians, everything in between. What about all those people who effectively did it? You're basically, what's the word they use? You're removing their agency, as a person, right? You're removing the fact that they did do that, so that means it is possible for other people. What I don't want to fall into, again, is then say, so it's possible for everyone. Pull yourself up by the bootstraps, bitch. Well, no, because then that's a way to incentivize not doing anything about it and letting the same system stay in place and letting the same precedents take hold of households. And so, I see this all the time from people who are so far removed from it, or people like you who have had at least an experience on the inside. And it does make me think about some of my cousins because, how long did you say your mom taught in the city?
30 years.
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Because it sounds like your mom, that whole thing, I want to make this the best 8 hours of their day. Your mom really gave a shit. She cared.
Yeah, she cared. My mom was cared so much, she would pride herself in not taking a sick day.
It's awesome.
And it's because she just gave. She just gave everything.
Now, I'm sure that she probably experienced this and talked about it, but I don't want to put words in your or her mouth, but I'll speak from my cousins I've spoken with. Unfortunately, a lot of the teachers do not have that mentality. And, you know, like my cousin Erin, she cared about that so much. She set up like workshops like in the summer that she would physically have, this is not like Zoom, like have parents come to, she couldn't force them to, but have them come to talk about like the education of their kids and different things at home they could do. And, you know, it was sad to her that maybe, I don't know, I don't want to put a percentage on it, but if I were guesstimating in my head, maybe 5-10% of parents actually came, but like they made the time for it. And they did want to do it. And even like single mothers who were working 2 jobs and supporting the household, like they wanted that resource. And she's like, why aren't all teachers doing this? You know, you can't make them do it. And yet, you know, it does go to show you people can just get sucked into the environment that's around them. And like guess what? There were a lot of mothers who weren't there because they are working several jobs and they can't be there. And they're trying to keep a roof over their kid's head. Should that parent be blamed if their kid gets into some trouble when they live in a neighborhood that has 10,000 people living within a quarter mile of them? I don't think so. You know, but how do you fix it? I don't know, man. Like I don't have the answers for this stuff, which sucks.
I don't think there's answers. I think it just really starts in your community. It starts in your family. It starts in your unit. And you know, if you have a terrible family and a terrible upbringing,
it's tough.
It's just really hard.
The odds are against you.
It's really hard. But all I can say is if you're out there and you have it the worst and you just don't know what to do and you don't have the support of a mom or the support of a father or the support of anything, then you need to find something within yourself at any moment to know that none of that defines you.
Yeah.
That none of that is you, that you never asked to be born. And the fact that you are born, that you are a human and that you do matter to the world, because we all matter. Everyone on this planet matters. If someone is suffering, then the collective is suffering more than it should. And if that person's suffering could be diminished, then our collective suffering would be diminished. And all I can say is, like, thank God we have resources right now, and the internet, and
yes.
and podcasts and YouTube and personalities that can help take place for what lacks in life. For example, in college, I didn't study a lot of the people I get to look at on some of the pictures on the wall in here. You know, like when I left college, I studied the greats, and in my opinion, the GOAT, Steve Jobs.
Love it. Love that.
Because, like,
he's amazing.
Was
amazing.
Exactly. And it's like his story is amazing. Adopted, like just unbelievable story. And then it showcases into his entire, you know, lifespan.
He also had amazing adoptive parents too.
Exactly.
Who understood that, like, no disrespect to them, but their kid was a genius, and he was a lot smarter than they were. And they gave him the creative outlet to pursue his passions, and that's a beautiful thing to me, because the world got to see it because of that.
Exactly. And you know, right? Parenting, you know, recognizing, understanding, like same thing in a company, right? A good leader hires a good employee or good manager or good director and gets out of their way.
Yes.
A good parent recognizes something and I'm not a parent, recognizes something in a child, let them go explore it.
Yeah.
Let them go test it. Let them go touch it. Let them go feel it. Don't tell them it's stupid. Don't tell them, like, and you know, don't put your insecurities onto your kid. Don't let them not go after a dream because you exchange yours for whatever life you might be living now. and if the parenting isn't there, you hopefully have some people around you that you can pull from. A friend's parents,
Yes.
Someone that you follow closely online, right? Like there's so many mentors, like, someone that's great, who's been great for me too, like Gary Vaynerchuk. He's a great mentor. You could study Steve Jobs, you study Elon Musk's, you study like these guys who just go and do shit. And if those guys don't resonate with you, there's someone out there who will. Like I just listened to this guy tell his story. I might mess up his name, but his like Instagram handle is Steven. So he was like early in social. Okay. Yeah. He is from England, like poor, like a story that you hear and you're like, how? Like, how did this even happen? Okay. He said a story where he was so poor, he went to university. He dropped out of university. His mom said, if you drop out of the university, I'll never speak to you again. Dropped out because he said, why would I be in a school with the people next to me sleeping on the desk? Did all this shit, worked shitty jobs, lived in shitty neighborhoods, had no food, talked about a time where he went into a pizza shop and put his hand into the cushion and found like some coins. And then he thought I could go into all the seats and find a bunch of coins. And he's like, wow, I could eat for 2 weeks that day. He went on to start a company called, I think, Social Chain. And it went public, and then he left it and whatever. And by the, like, whatever this was, he came from the worst upbringing, having no money, limited education, limited resources, limited this, limited that. And what he was saying on that podcast, like, I mean, I'm telling it to you right now. That's how much it stayed with me. And it's, you are born into a situation, you're born into an environment, but you do not have to be the product of that circumstance. There are ways to change the course of your life. And if you have to make a mistake, and one that is costly, and you have to do whatever it is that you have to do, then hopefully you learn from that mistake. Someone I follow closely that I think is a tremendous voice and providing value to communities and all communities is a guy by Wallow267 who did 20 years in jail. He's from Philly, and he talks about this stuff all the time. And he's such an amazing, like, human being because of his ability to overcome everything he went through. 20 years in jail to come out, to know that he had the ability to go build this brand. I've never even met the man. I've walked by him a couple of times on South Street, said, yo, Wallow, big fan. But he's just someone who went after his dream, who learned and studied and took time of whatever he had to go through and said, when I come out of this, I'm going to get mine. I'm fucking getting it.
Yeah.
And I watch his shit. He motivates me all the time because he came out of all that shit, all that stuff that we talked about. And he's making it. He's making a name for himself.
I really love what you're saying, because we are drawn, and we should be, by the way, to the comeback stories or the underdog stories, And so you don't want to remove the ability for those things to happen by, once again, generalizing and painting a picture that is just, no matter what, bleak. And, maybe the intentions of the people who do that for political gain or whatever aren't bad. A lot of times they probably are. It's probably advantageous for them to paint that picture. But, that's also why we just see polar opposite and bad ideas, in my opinion, on these two parties, because they don't find a way to negotiate that. Well, it's not here, but it's here. It's not there, but it's here, and I appreciate someone that can come on here without me bringing that up and paint that picture. But to go back a little bit to what you were saying, I love that you've studied Steve Jobs and everything, because he's one of the guys I've closely studied as well, and I love his story all the way around. And imperfect guy, by the way, certainly had a lot of flaws. He could be a total asshole. He did some things wrong in his career, but I like to look at the overall quality of what someone did, and in my opinion, it's amazing.
It's just a real story.
Yes.
It's just making mistakes, and just the self-awareness and growing into the man that you can become. But when you want to change the world, and when you really want to make an impact, and when you have a vision of how to do it, it's hard to step out of that, and that's why, when I it's cool, and I'm really happy that you thought, studied him and resonate with Steve Jobs, because some people are like, oh, he was such an asshole, or he was this, or he was mean, or he worked his employees too hard, or whatever it is. It's just he changed everything.
Yes.
That's the only way to say it. He changed everything. And even when and the thing about him is too, he knew when he needed to come together with his competitors. He knew when he needed Bill Gates, and Bill Gates knew when he needed Steve Jobs. That's that yin and yang type energy.
He had a short-term memory too. He did. You
have to in business, because sometimes the person who that's the crazy shit about it, because Apple, Microsoft, this and that, the back and forth, the creating of this thing and the race and this, and it's oh my God. And then it's well, those brands are still here.
Look what he did.
They're still doing it. They're both titans of industry and changed the game for forever. I'll never forget getting my first iPhone, so.
Yeah, man. We look at, I always try to hit on the point that when you say art is an idea. It's not the medium. Picasso had a paintbrush. Steve Jobs had engineers. Mm-hmm. It's no different. Mm-hmm. He built in something to our lives. He made us see ourselves in the products and everything. And I'll die on this hill. You look at the 21st century, he lived for less than 11 years of it. But, so far, he's by far the most important artist of this century. And I say it like that. Not businessman, artist. Mm-hmm. In fact, sometimes he was a very good businessman, to be clear. But sometimes he would skirt the business for the vision, And long term, that's actually probably great business. But short term, sometimes it's not. But, you look at all the different examples. I don't even want to use the word examples, but all the different things that he did in his career that people now look to for inspiration, or to see what he did wrong on some stuff too. And not to totally turn it away here, but to totally turn it away for a second, one of the things that influenced how he looked at the world and his vision of how to create things was his acid trips that he took. I think several of them were in India, and then out in the desert shortly after college. And he was open about that. Mm-hmm. And again, this is before any of that. It's not mainstream now, but that was before any of that was even remotely mainstream. And you look at the history of this stuff. First of all, before I go into this, I want to make sure too, because you and I didn't have a chance to talk about this, but how much are you pretty knowledgeable as well on psychedelics and stuff like that?
Yeah, it's something I definitely incorporate into studying and being an advocate for. I have a pretty solid knowledge of psilocybin magic mushrooms.
Good. Okay.
And it's something I incorporate into my life.
So we could definitely talk about this then. And this is what I did want to get to this before we get out of here. But you look at, that's one example, but he shaped a lot of that through something that has been more stigmatized than weed, and I've never taken an acid trip, and I've never, even to this day, I haven't had a moment yet where I'm yeah, I'm going to take one, it's for whatever, but I see it from so many different people, influencers across culture over the years who have, and It's an interesting question to me because once you get into harder stuff, and acid I would definitely call harder than weed. I don't think it's close. You know, we start to get to the point where my one concern is that I'm always open to a new idea, and we can talk about, you know, some of the things that they've figured out medically for like PTSD patients with psychedelics and stuff like that, which I think is awesome. But I always worry about the equal but opposite reaction in everything. So I think it's pretty dumb when people just stand on a soapbox based on no empirical data and scream no drugs on stuff. And, you know, what even is a drug, right? And they're just defining it based on what's been beaten into them since they were 5 years old, and they have nothing to back up. I think that's bad. I worry about people hijacking a movement like what you're a part of and saying like, oh, it's all okay. And by the way, what I don't mean there is like some of the people who have advocated legalizing all drugs. I'm not saying that's my stance. I need to look at that much more, but I'm open to the things I've heard there. I think that's interesting. I'm not saying that though. I'm talking about the people who then come out and suddenly try to make arguments for drugs like, you know, if we're going to start hearing that, yo, you should do cocaine regularly or shit like that. And I'm not saying I hear that, but I'm saying I worry about it getting there. So looking at like the psychedelics realm, which now is right behind weed and starting to become like there's direct investment from corporations into it. The government, I think, is like commissioning studies on it as well. So you can see the light at the end of the tunnel there. How do you navigate educating on something like that as well, bringing it to the mainstream, but also not encouraging abuse and not encouraging the quote unquote slippery slope, which exists in everything? It's a loaded question.
Drug education is terrible. Like, right? It's fear-based. It's usually done from a law enforcement perspective, and it doesn't usually lead with anything positive in any way, shape, or form, right? Like I'm going to like when I was a young kid and, you know, there was Dare. Like, you remember Dare?
Yeah.
And
I think we've ripped them on this
show
show before.
It was like, you know, weed's a gateway drug to all of these harder drugs. Well, let me tell you, that's false. And weed is actually considered an exit drug for a lot of people who have addictions to opioids and other substances that do not bring them value and ultimately start to bring their life down instead of bringing it up where they want to be from using a substance that's hopefully going to manage their pain or something like that. The reason I believe LSD, mushrooms are a Schedule 1 and weed and heroin. Heroin, I believe, is Schedule 1 for a reason. Because, I mean, I'm grateful that, you know, my dad taught me about drugs growing up. A lot about drugs because my dad loved certain things. And I was even more grateful when I got old enough to understand that when I was like 7 or 8, he just stopped using any drug, like all of them. And
as an example,
as he didn't want me to grow up around it, or like he didn't want me to be able to like remember him like high or stoned or just fucked up. And I thought that was really, really cool, right?
Agreed.
And, you know, he says to me still, he probably said it to me last week, if I had to do it all differently, I would have left the hard drugs out of my life. I never needed more than that. Yeah. And to me, the hard drugs that he would describe were cocaine and quaaludes, uppers and downers.
Yep.
And he said the addictiveness to cocaine was a terrible experience.
Yeah.
It's like, it's such a terrible experience because you go from doing a certain amount to having to do this amount to doing it and then doing the dumbest shit you've ever done in your life. So for me, it's like, it's all education. So I got the brunt of my education from, you know, my dad giving me his experience on more so what not to do. And, you know, my choice to not get active in my cannabis consumption until I was 18. I mean, I hit like a blunt or something like before that, but I never was like into my cannabis ritual and experience because I just saw some destruction from drugs, and that was because at that time, like, it was kind of all grouped together.
Yes.
It was like, oh, my dad did and had a problem with this and this, and he liked to smoke weed, and he liked to do this and this and this.
Yes.
So it was whatever. And it was like, that helped me make my decisions, and I think helped me get through like those like young years in high school where peer pressure to me there is no peer pressure. Like, I didn't like drinking. I don't need to drink. Like, I mean, like, what? Like, I mean, I don't need to try your weed. I don't need to try your drugs. Like, I didn't need any of that. I just didn't. It wasn't in my headspace. And I think it was because I was taught that certain substances were bad in a way, at least when my father chose to indulge in them. Because I don't think drugs are good or bad. I think it's the outcome from what you do after you consume a substance is good or bad. And if you want to put the onus on the drug, then that's a cop-out. The drug is the drug. It's the person.
I understand now. Okay.
You know,
I
it's
didn't
like,
follow that at first.
Yeah, it's like, you know, when you give rats 2 bottles to drink from and you put cocaine in the one and regular water in the other, they'll drink the cocaine water until they die.
Yep.
That is the addictive nature of that substance.
We've all seen that. Most of us have seen that up close too. It's an ugly thing. It
sucks. It's sad because everyone says it's not going to happen to me.
Oh,
everyone says I got under control. And the next thing you know, like, why are you doing cocaine at 1 o'clock in the afternoon?
Yep.
You know, like, where is your normal right now? So yeah, I was just grateful that I had that open, honest dialogue, you know, with my parents. And
he told you said like 7 or 8 years old too. You first had that convo.
He was
when you were young.
He quit all the drugs when that age, and you know, I remember him just educating me when I was young, like 9, 10.
It's a good dad.
Yeah, he's a great. I mean, that's what I mean. Like, shout out to my parents. They're amazing in what they did for me and just how they were, right? But you know, to get back to the question in a sense, I don't think drugs are bad. I think that when you use a drug and then you get a outcome from that drug, it could be good or bad. Like, some people have done cocaine once, twice, and they could say, I had fun. It was a good night.
Yes.
It was okay. I had fun. It's not super for me, but I'm gonna leave it there.
It's all, in fairness too, it is technically something, and you don't know. Like, my line was always very simple to explain this with drugs. Can kill me or can't. And like, I'll hedge on that and say, like, yes, like, alcohol can kill me, but like, am I going to drink 70 shots of tequila in a row or am I not? Right.
Yeah.
So like, if it's something that I could die from, I wasn't touching it. And I think that's a very good line to have. And unfortunately, with something like cocaine, that is an issue you run into. You could be Len Bias. You could be the guy that tries it. Now, he might have done it other times too, but like, you have one bad line, maybe something's in it, maybe something's not, maybe your heart doesn't react to it right. Like, you're fucked. You're fucked.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a big, big difference there. So, you know, it's important we say that. I understand what you mean, though, when you're saying it's not the problem of the existence of the thing. You know, like, you're right about that. Like, you make the choice.
Yeah, and when I was like taught that, or I heard that, or like processed it, It's like a lot because you want to be like, oh, cocaine's so bad. Well, it's bad if you abuse it. It's bad if you wake up in the morning and the first thing you need to do is a line of cocaine. But if you, like you do anything else, like with alcohol, and you can responsibly manage your drug usage, okay, good for you. Most people can't. Most people go down a slippery slope. Most people abuse a drug. Most people abuse sugar. Most people overeat. Most people don't exercise. Most people self-sabotage.
Yeah.
I mean, what is a drug? In my opinion, sugar's a drug. I know people that drink and eat so much sugar, they don't know why they're sick all the time. It's the sugar.
Yeah. No, and it's all in the context of how you are wired to view things.
Yeah, and is sugar good or bad? Because sugar is addictive.
Yes,
sugar is a drug. Sugar creates diabetes. Sugar creates hypertension and high blood pressure. Sugar creates sickness and disease. And sugar is in everything, and it's 100% legal. And people can overdose on sugar every day. And then they can wind up 10, 15, 20 years from now at the doctor wondering why they're sick. You probably shouldn't have drank Coca-Cola every day.
Yes.
You probably shouldn't have drank all those sugary juices every day.
Again, where I'll push back is that the difference there in that example is that with sugar, it can take 5-10 years, right? If I pulled out, 4 tablespoons of brown sugar right now, I'm gonna be fine. I'll be all right, right? Yeah. I might be a little wired, but I'm gonna be fine. Yeah. But technically, you can, and this is just a fact. You don't know how your body reacts. You can take cocaine once and die.
True.
It is true. And I'll agree with you. There are, one of the most shocking things at college for me is how rampant cocaine was. I knew with weed.
Where'd you go to school?
Of course. I went to a school called Bucknell.
Oh,
in
yeah,
the middle of PA.
Yeah.
And I'm not picking on Bucknell. When I went to other campuses, it was the same shit. Like the last people you would think try it did. And I went through all college without having it. And I'm pretty proud of that. But in fairness, even though I would never recommend it, and let's be very fucking clear about that. Yes, did I know some people who could have it once in a while and were fine and had no addictiveness to it? Sure. But you don't know when you try it if you're going to be that person or not. Like you might not have been able to pick out of the line who was going to get addicted to it and who wasn't. And that's where the slippery slope is for me. And that's where I'm never going to blame the government. Even if we're going to have the conversation of the benefits of all legalization, which I'm open to, I'm not going to sit here and be like, the government's bad for making that illegal. Dude, it fucks up people's lives. I get it, I will get at the racial disparity with it. I'll fucking hit them on that all day, and we already talked about that. But, I think it's also different. As we've said all day, it's different talking about weed. I do see some differences too with the psychedelics, and I need to educate myself a lot more on it. And again, I'm someone who's never done it. I've never done Molly. I've never done a mushroom, whatever. I'm a simple guy. If I felt the need, like a tattoo, I don't have a tattoo. I have nothing against tattoos. I don't feel the need to get one. You know what I mean? That's okay. But now that I'm seeing a lot of people who, especially when they start talking about the veterans and stuff who have severe trauma and have been under supervised environments with medical experts, microdosed on this stuff, which I'd love for you to talk about a little bit because I still, when I say those things, I don't fully understand what I'm talking about, but they've seen dramatic results from that. And to me, I want to look at things that see positive results on lives. Again, I don't want to go as far as the people who then equal but opposite and say, bring it all here, let's encourage it. I don't want to do that. But I do want to look at where can we work this in,
So in the 1950s, scientists and doctors were researching the benefits as well as the side effects of cannabis of psychedelics, and they were studying LSD. They had a lot of success in seeing how it could help with alcoholism and tobacco dependency. And for whatever reason, this is something I might have to look up a little bit more, that research was eviscerated once we established the war on drugs and the scheduling of these drugs. Because you know what you said, veterans, right? Veterans go through a lot of shit. They deal with a lot of shit. And coming back to a society that's not, you know, filled with violence and filled with, you know, playing the defense or having to do unfathomable things, it's hard to come back and feel like you are a part of something that you can understand or be involved with. So, you know, similarly to where we talked a little bit about cannabis, like gives you that homeostasis, that balance within you. They've had people do one trip with mushrooms or with an LSD and have seen substantial results.
Yes.
And have seen people's lives change from one dose, one therapy, you know, whatever it might be. I mean, we need to study this more. We just need to study it more and more and more and more, because really PTSD is your mind constantly fucking with you.
Yes.
And, you know, someone who I got to spend some time with ways back, you know, his name's Leo Bridgewater. He's a New Jersey cannabis advocate, a veteran, and someone who I have tremendous respect for. He suffered from PTSD. So he actually championed to get PTSD as an approved condition in Pennsylvania. And what he was suffering from is he just couldn't sleep. And the lack of sleep would ignite the PTSD, and it would really, really, really be bad. So what he needed to do was he looked to find a product, a cannabis product, and that would help him sleep. So he actually got to work with a local grower in New Jersey and come up with a strain and a flower product that would be specific to what he was dealing with. So it would be, you know, a sedative. It would make him relax, and it would help him sleep. When you are able to find something that helps you and changes the course of your life, I mean, like, it should be required for people coming out of a highly escalated situation and very sensitive to what they just experienced. In my opinion, there should be like a requirement to have a psychedelic experience to assimilate back into where you aren't looking over your shoulder, where you aren't going to get a bomb dropped on you right now, to where you can sleep, to where you can take the edge off. But
I think
it's crazy.
I will say I disagree. I get worried about words like requirement with stuff, which I don't want people to take out of context what I mean there. But I don't think you should ever be forcing people to have to put something, you know, a drug into their body and stuff. And like,
I agree with that.
I'll use an example just relevant right now. You know, I firmly believe in the vaccine and that Bill Gates is not putting a microchip in my blood. And it was an easy decision for me to get vaccinated. I disagree with a lot of the anti-vax sentiment that gets put out there, but I understand when people at least get pissed off at the fact that it is, you know, the slippery slope of control as to what they can do with their body is out of control. I will agree with them there. And unfortunately, I think it fuels a lot of that. So it's just very unfortunate to me because I've gotten vaccines my whole life. I believe in them. It didn't fucking do anything to me. Like, that's what I want people to do. But I think the government kind of purposely doesn't want some people to do it. I think they want to get all the people who are anti-authoritarian to then speak out and divide people. That's just my theory. But, you know, when I look at this stuff, I don't ever want to get to the point where we're saying you have to do this or have to do that. Where I would come to where you are is, do I think that there should be options put on the table for people that are proven over time? Yes.
Yeah,
I do.
I think in a way, what I was trying to say is like when you come out of those environments, and I'm sure you have to sit with like a counselor or a therapist, or there's like some sort of
coming to the mic a little bit,
or there's some sort of thing that helps you assimilate back into the society that you left. One of the good use cases of psychedelics is when you incorporate a psychedelic and talk therapy. So what I was in, I guess in my head thinking, didn't articulate it well enough, is that if there was that use case to where when you come back to assimilate, if there was an option to utilize a mushroom, an LSD formulation to help people actually talk through this experience that they went to. That's been proven. Yeah. That's like, okay, we're going to give someone this small microdose. We've had 50 people come through and do this. We've studied this. Most of them opened up. They had a breakthrough. They were able to talk about what they did. They were able to say what they felt, what they all of these things, right? And that's where that substance helps a little bit. It helps break down what you think you're supposed to feel or supposed to do or supposed to say. It kind of shreds the construct of everything that is. So I'm saying if like there was a way that we incorporated these substances and stopped demonizing these substances and allowed them to do their thing and could give them to the people that really go through the most traumatic shit mentally when you're thrown into a war or into an area that is just filled with things that, you know, not many people would ever want to go through or see or experience. Maybe one time, maybe in 100 years, there'll be a option for someone to have.
God, I hope it's not that long.
have a therapist, and that therapist could say, "Hey, we have an option here for you to take this capsule of 100 milligrams of psilocybin. You're not gonna trip. You're not gonna do anything. It's just gonna make you feel a little bit more calm inside to open up, so we can actually have a breakthrough here and get to what's actually bothering you. Because if we don't break through on what's actually bothering you, then this therapy is gonna go for nothing."
Yeah,
it's the breakthrough moments from psychedelics that I think provide a lot of its value. It's like everyone wants to break through in a way, like, you know, break through this, break through that, break through our depression, break through our anxiety, break through this chronic pain, break through this rut we're in, you know, get to the next level here. How do we have the breakthroughs? Sometimes you need a little assistance. And if, you know, we could give that assistance to the people who are keeping us safe and, you know, protecting freedoms and putting their lives at risk, then, you know, I'm for that. But yeah, I agree with you. You shouldn't have to put anything in your body that you don't want to. There should be the choice to put it in your body, what you want to put in your body. And outside of that, I'm hopeful. You know, I'm optimistic. Dude, I'm optimistic.
I think you should be.
Yeah.
I think, look, there's a lot, as we said at the beginning, there is a lot of work left to be done, and we're not far enough on some things that should be common sense at this point. But from where we were a decade ago, that's a very good sign. And, you know, guys like you are playing a huge role in that. And we just did like pretty close to 3 hours, I think, looking at the clock. So, you know, if I kept going down that rabbit hole with you, we'd be here for another 2 or 3.
Hey,
so
we'll do it again soon.
Yeah, dude, we got to close it up. But listen, man, this was highly, highly informative. I'm gonna have to comb through this one a bunch. We got into some pretty touchy waters too.
Yeah.
With some stuff. I like that.
Yeah, me too, bro. And you know, really thank you for having me. And,
oh hell yeah, dude.
You know, I really appreciate it. So, you know.
And shout out to Dill for the introduction.
Shout out Famous Dill. Go cop that Crypto Rich album and
yeah, baby.
You know, go stream his shit on Spotify.
He was like, dude, you got to talk to the Jewish sauce boss. And I'm like, I don't even know what that person does, but unless they're like a murderer, I want to talk to him based on the name. So he's like, yeah, man, you'll like him. But
yeah, man. Well, no, thanks, man. Like,
thank you.
You know, listen, my name's Will Edelstein. Company's called Jewish Sauce Boss. You can reach out to us anytime.
What's the ad on Instagram again?
It's Jewish Sauce Boss at Instagram, jewishsauceboss.com, and you know, we're available, guys.
I love it. Well, thank you again, and thanks for providing a lot of information. I'm gonna check out a bunch of the sources that we went through today too, because like I said, there's some things like, I'm sorry if I sound stupid on some things, it's because I am, you know.
No, this is a new realm too, and
Yeah.
even me, like someone who lives in this arena and spends a lot of time in it, I'm learning so much, and I don't ever mind when someone teaches me or corrects me on something that I might not be saying the best, but
Sure.
definitely doing my best to share the information and educate myself along the way too, because the science is vast, the plant is vast, and the ability to change people's lives is really here, and the time is now. And I just hope we get some people out of jail, and
Yeah.
you know, that's kind of where I'll leave it, my bro.
Well, you're doing a great job, and thanks for coming here to do it. So I appreciate it, brother.
Thanks, brother. Yeah.
All right. And everybody else, you know what it is. Give it a thought. Get back to me.